Welcome to Airchecks. This week and next week, we will be playing Horizons West. Produced for and broadcast on the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. Actual taping dates unknown. The 13-episode Horizons West was a radio docu-drama depiction of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Directed by William Lawley, all 13 eps were written by popular radio duo, Carl A. and William Tunberg. Here is the first 6 episodes of Horizons West.
The American West. Once it could have been the British, Spanish, or even the Russian West. It became American primarily because of the explorations of 2 young Army officers, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Their pioneering journey stands as one of the great achievements in the history of the United States.
Captain Lewis.
Hello, Sergeant.
Welcome back, sir. Hope you had a tolerable trip.
Well, I took a new trail from Detroit and ran into an Indian situation that looked tight for a little while, but you know me, Sergeant. Paymaster, 1st Infantry, can't let the men down. Here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Who won the election?
Jefferson. Noble Sir Thomas, the champion of the common man.
Good old Mr. Jefferson. He made it. He made it.
Republicans are all alike. No control.
What was that, Sergeant? Are you criticizing me or Mr. Jefferson?
Just giving an opinion, sir. What this country needs is a ruling class.
Sergeant, you're an idiot. 3 cheers for Tom Jefferson.
What's going on here? I'm trying to work.
Oh, you, Lewis.
Yes, sir. The sergeant just told me Mr. Jefferson was elected president.
And you're letting everybody know you're friends with him, is that it?
I voted for him, if that's what you mean.
No, not exactly, Captain. There's a letter for you from him in my office. Come in.
A letter from Mr. Jefferson?
Looks to me like a personal letter.
Well, our families are neighbors in Virginia.
Here. It came by special messenger day before yesterday.
Thank you, sir. It's a surprise to hear from him when he's busy taking over such a big job.
Well, Captain, good news or bad?
Dear Lieutenant Lewis, I'll have to tell him I made captain, sir. In view of my recent election to the presidency of the United States, I find that I will require a private secretary. Your tact and social adaptability, your knowledge of the western country of the Army, has rendered it desirable for public as well as private purposes that you should be engaged in that office. If you accept, please obtain approbation from General Wilkinson and repair to the Presidential Mansion, Washington City. What do you think of that, Colonel? I am to be the new private secretary to the President.
I don't understand it, Lewis. You, a secretary?
Why not, sir?
Well, if your written reports are any indication, you don't have a hand. You have a rooster scratch, and you can't spell. Come, Captain. Why would the President want you for a secretary?
Very simple, Colonel. He likes me.
Horizons West, the continued story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Now, with Harry Bartell as Meriwether Lewis and John Anderson as William Clark, listen to Chapter 1, Mr. Jefferson's Dream. Years before he was elected president in 1800, Thomas Jefferson had dreamed of exploring the unknown lands west of the Mississippi River. Unknown lands that were said to contain wonders such as a mountain of pure salt and prehistoric mammoths. Now that he had been inaugurated, Jefferson was in a position to realize his dreams by sending what he liked to call a corps of discovery into the West. Because of certain political and commercial rivalries, such an expedition would have to be kept secret as long as possible and would need superlative leadership. After considering a number of young men, Jefferson finally selected the leader, Meriwether Lewis, and had ensured the secrecy of the choice by offering him the job of private secretary to the President.
My name is Meriwether Lewis, and I'm making what the Colonel has called rooster scratches in my journal. In March of 1801, I was 26 years old, a captain in the 1st Infantry and paymaster for the regiment. I liked Army life, even though being paymaster meant I had to travel constantly through the wilderness parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, Ohio, and along the Mississippi frontier in order to pay the scattered troops of the regiment. I managed to make the rounds about twice a year. Anyway, on March 6, 1801, the day after I received my letter from Mr. Jefferson, I left the Army depot in Pittsburgh on my way to Washington, the new federal city. The spring rains made the roads a slough of mud, and it took me over 2 weeks to reach the White House. Mr. Jefferson had gone for a short vacation to Monticello, but he left instructions for me to move into his quarters, where I would receive free food and lodging and a salary of $600 per year, much better than captain's pay, I might add. So I unpacked and tried to get settled before the president returned.
A little more of the bœuf bourguignon, Merriweather.
Bœuf bourguignon? I was about to call it the best beef stew I ever ate.
Have some more.
Mr. President, I've had 2 helpings already. Where did you ever find such a cook?
In Paris. When I was there as United States ambassador, I persuaded him to come home with me. Now, shall we take our brandy into the library? I suppose you're anxious to know a little about your duties.
Well, frankly, sir, I've been wondering why you chose me for the job.
For the sake of morale, let's have one thing understood. Friendship had nothing to do with it.
Yes, sir. Surely you could have found someone with a more impressive hand, and surely you had more qualified applicants.
For a secretarial position, Merriweather, all of the applicants were better qualified than you.
Then I don't understand.
Well, think of the position as a sort of aide-de-camp. After all, secretary is only an official title.
Like a general's aide?
Exactly.
And not a secretary.
I like to write my own letters, and I can, with either hand. And later I'll show you a copying machine I've invented. Now, all I really need is a file clerk, and that will leave you free to handle certain confidential matters for me.
Yes, sir.
I wonder if you remember, 9 years ago you asked me if you could go on Andre Michaud's scientific expedition into the West. You were too young then, but now you're as qualified as any man to lead a similar expedition.
Even if I fail like Michaud, I couldn't think of anything I'd rather do.
I thought you'd feel that way about it. Now, you would explore the Missouri clear to its mountain headwaters, and then go on to the Pacific. If it is America's destiny to be a great nation, she has to go beyond the Mississippi. Your expedition may or may not be the first step in such expansion, and in securing our borders against the British and the French. Oh, I don't know yet. We have to let things develop a bit more, but I want you to think about such a trip anyway.
Yes, sir.
Oh, have you seen this?
I was admiring it, sir. It's a very handsome telescope.
I'm trying to figure out how to double this refracting space in order to add light and magnitude.
May I have a closer look? Scarcely a day went by when I didn't think about the expedition. Soon I was calling it the Corps of Discovery, as Mr. Jefferson did. I studied, I prepared. About a year later, the president called me into his office.
Come in.
Good morning, Mr. President. You wanted to speak with me?
Oh, yes. I thought I'd tell you to step up your preparations for the Corps of Discovery.
Step it up? I will, sir, with all possible dispatch.
Well, devote full time to it. I don't have to remind you of the necessity for secrecy. Don't even tell your mother.
Least of all my mother. She'd have it all over town.
I think you ought to know I'm secretly trying to buy New Orleans. Now that Louisiana is French again, that's the only way we can keep Mississippi open to American commerce. As long as Napoleon controls the river, we can't think of Western expansion.
True, sir.
Napoleon is almost sure to attack England. Now, part of British retaliation would probably include the occupation of Louisiana. There are no French troop contingents or Navy units in the area large enough to stop them. Can you imagine the British on our western border? We would use the Mississippi only after fighting and winning a major war, something we can't afford at present.
We're to wait for news of the purchase negotiations?
Oh, not at all. We'll explain your project as a scientific trip to locate the headwaters of the Mississippi.
Very good, sir.
Well, if I can buy more than New Orleans, I will. But once you're across the Mississippi and up the Missouri, we'll have won a partial victory. Also, I'd like you to get the Indian trade away from the British. You can do a lot towards that by establishing friendly relations with the tribes. Of course, you'll acquire detailed information about the route west to the mouth of the Columbia. I'm hoping the rumors are true that there's a single portage from the headwaters of the Missouri to the headwaters of the Columbia.
A water route to the Western Ocean.
Remember, water or land. We must have economic control of the continent.
Yes, sir. We'll be outflanking Spain, France, and England all in one simple maneuver.
Above all, Meriwether, the United States must grow. An expansion to the west is the natural direction.
Yes, sir.
Well, perhaps I'm asking too much, but I hope you won't neglect the scientific side of the journey. All my adult life, I've wanted to know what lies beyond the Mississippi. I've heard so many stories, tales. People have brought me boxes of mammoth bones from the area. Think of it. Actual prehistoric animals in the distant west. I wish I could go myself. I really do. I've been east to Europe. But do you know that I've never been more than 50 miles west of Albemarle County?
On January 18, 1803, Mr. Jefferson sent a secret message to Congress asking for an allocation of funds for the expedition. Congress complied, and I started gathering equipment and supplies, plus trying to cram navigation into my head at night. The more I studied, the more I thought of William Clark, who was a genius at navigation. Billy would be a great asset to the Corps of Discovery, but he was also a friend of mine, perhaps my best friend. And I couldn't pick his brains and take all the glory for myself. Maybe Billy could become my co-leader. I went to Mr. Jefferson to find out.
Come in.
May I speak to you, sir?
Oh, of course, Meriwether, of course. Close the door and sit down.
It's about the science side of the trip, sir.
Well, I'm glad you're giving it thought.
Mr. President, I'm not possessed of enough learning to
Who is Meriwether? Whoever knows enough. However, you're strong in botany, zoology, the study of minerals. Your knowledge of geography and navigation is sound.
But not sound enough, sir. Do you remember William Clark, the younger brother of General George Rogers Clark?
Billy, of course I remember him. A good boy.
Well, Billy and I have been friends for a long time. In 1797, he was my company commander. And the next year, he resigned to go home to Kentucky and help on the family farm. He's 32 now. He's a first-rate soldier and frontiersman and a genius at cartography and geography. I think I could talk him into going with us.
Might be a good idea. You'll be more efficient with Billy to help. Go ahead. Enlist him as your aide.
Not as my aide, sir. Co-leader. Same rank, same pay, same allotment of glory. Or disgrace.
Are you that sure of him?
I don't follow you, sir.
Well, do you know him that well? Usually, having two leaders is the quickest route to dissension and failure.
Not with Billy. If he can't help us, he won't have any part of it.
I'd advise you to think it over carefully.
I have, sir. We need Billy Clark.
The decision is yours. You're the leader of the expedition.
The crops look mighty fine. Be able to pay off a few more of the old debts.
There you are, Mr. Clark.
Hello, York. You look like you've been running.
Yes, sir. Got a letter for you. General George says it might be important.
Maybe, York. It's from my old friend Meriwether Lewis at the White House.
White House? Mr. Jefferson's house?
Pursuant to the President's wishes, I am taking an expedition to explore the Missouri and the Columbia River valleys, eventually ending on the shores of the Pacific Sea. I hope to return to Washington on one of the trading vessels that call now and then at the mouth of the Columbia. If there is anything in this enterprise which would induce you to participate with me in its fatigues, dangers, and its honors, believe me, there is no man on earth with whom I should feel equal pleasure in sharing them as with yourself. What do you think of that, York? He wants me to go with him. Well, I'd better find George. George! George!
What's wrong? York, what's the matter with Billy?
Well, sir... this letter, George. Read it.
All right. Huh? What's in Missouri? Columbia? Huh? What? Well. Billy, seems to me there's a great field over here for a young man of ability and energy. Billy, accepted one.
Well, what about the farm? You can't manage it all by yourself.
Oh, crops are first rate this year. Jonathan and I'll hire some help while you're gone. Go with Captain Lewis.
I'm glad you feel that way.
I'll get our gear in order, sir. I'll get us some horses to ride.
Us? I don't remember that Captain Lewis invited you.
I'm not letting you go into that wilderness alone.
Clark sent me an acceptance as soon as he could, and then left for Louisville to begin recruiting under instructions to enlist for a voyage up the Mississippi rather than the Missouri. Secrecy was still important. I left quietly for Pittsburgh in the Army Supply Depot to check off equipment I'd ordered. Everything was ready, including a new kind of air gun or cannon, which would shoot a slug through 4 inches of wood. Only the boats were slow in construction. The workmen were incorrigible drunkards, and the more I tried to hurry them, the longer they took. But then I met Scannon. Oh, devils, why do they stall around? What do they gain from such infernal slow motion? When I assume a task, something always seems to go wrong. Like those men over there, the sodden lumps. Why must I have all the problems? I wonder if I'll ever get started. I have to stop talking to myself. I have to control these fits of depression. Too many of them could mean the failure of the trip. I must stop. Hey, boy, what are you barking at? You're huge. You're big as a pony. I'm sorry, boy. I don't want to disturb you.
He won't hurt you. He's just saying good day to you.
What's his name?
Alan, after me brother, God bless him. He's a Newfoundland. Not me brother, the dog. Weighs nigh on to 200 pounds.
Really?
Oh, he's a fine one. My brother was a fine man, too. As big a man as Cannon as a dog. Now, quiet down, my boy, and stop nuzzling the gentleman. It's rude of you. Well, he ain't much for strangers, sir, but he likes you.
Hello there, Dodd. Nice, Scannon. What do you take for him? I'm going on a long trip. I need a beast like him.
Well, I never thought much of selling Cannon, but he does keep reminding me of my dead brother, and it ain't good to be kept in sorrow. I tell you what, $20 and he's yours.
$20? You must be out of your head. No dog's worth that much.
This one is. $20, that's my final price.
All right. I may be a fool, but you've just sold a dog. 2 weeks later, the boats were ready. With 7 soldiers, a river pilot, 3 young men engaged on a trial basis, and Scannon, I started down the Ohio. The trip downriver was difficult at first. Several times we had to have the heavily laden boats pulled over shoals by oxen. The local settlers charged exorbitantly for such services. But as the river grew wider and deeper, the trip became easier. We stopped at Fort Massac, where I was fortunate enough to meet George Drouillard. He was known to be an experienced man among the Indians, a good woodsman and boatman, a crack shot. I engaged him as an interpreter since he didn't particularly want to enlist as a soldier. And then we took to the boats again. Good weather made it a relatively easy trip to Louisville, where I was to meet Billy Clark. Easy with the pole. Bring her in gently. Easy. Line. Tie her tight. Billy? Hey, Billy!
Meriwether, you're sure looking fine. You put on a few pounds at the president's table, didn't you?
I guess I did at that. It's good to see you.
And to see you. Say, where did you ever find a dog like that? He's a monster.
That's Scannon. I bought him in Pittsburgh. Scannon? Here, boy, here. Say hello to Captain Clark, Scanner.
He sure is big. I'm glad he's on our side.
Excuse me, Captain Clark. General George and Mr. Jonathan wanted you to be sure to bring Captain Lewis home for dinner.
Did I hear the word dinner?
You sure did.
I accept. George Druyark can take charge for me here.
Oh, excuse me, York. Meet Captain Lewis, my old friend. Meriwether, this is my man, York. I'm taking him along.
It's a pleasure, York.
I'm honored, sir.
I told York he'd be treated like the others as long as he pulled his own weight.
With those muscles, you shouldn't have any trouble pulling twice your weight, York. But all joking aside, as a man, you're on the same level as every one of us in the Corps of Discovery.
Thank you, sir.
We had dinner that night with my brothers, General George and Jonathan. And the next morning, we left for St. Louis. The boatmen were expert, and in what seemed like no time at all, we had angled into the Mississippi. We headed north. Several days later, we stopped along the eastern bank of the river opposite St. Louis, where we would set up our winter camp.
Billy handled the training of the men and ran the base camp, which left me free to range up and down the river and the surrounding countryside, gathering the last of the supplies, information, and what have you. I ran into some trouble with the local gentry who styled themselves private agents for Indian tribes. These voracious middlemen were responsible for most of the delays we experienced that first winter, when we had to deal with the Indians of the Illinois Territory. At Fort Kaskaskia, I met more trouble in the shape of an obstinate commanding officer, Captain Bissell, whom I had encountered several times during my tenure as paymaster for the 1st Infantry.
All you want is for me to transfer my two best men, Sergeant John Ordway and Private Patrick Gass, to your unit. Why, Lewis? Why?
I told you once, Captain, Ordway is an experienced non-com. Gass is an expert carpenter and boat builder.
The answer is no.
But I'll be in boats for months. Suppose I need to make emergency repairs or build a new boat when I'm hundreds of miles from any base.
No, Lewis, my men stay here with me.
Do you mind telling me why?
I refuse to weaken the potential of my command to make it easier on you.
Since you won't cooperate, I have no recourse but to give you this letter.
All Army personnel, you are hereby ordered to honor any demand made upon you by Captain Meriwether Lewis. An order from him is to be considered an order from me. Signed, Thomas Jefferson.
How about that, Bissell? Is that authority enough for you? Having read Mr. Jefferson's letter, Captain Bissell gave in with much grumbling. I left Fort Kaskaskia with Ordway and Gass, going directly to our winter camp. The electrifying news had come that Napoleon had sold all of Louisiana, not just New Orleans, to the United States. Everybody was filled with an outsized excitement. Everybody but Billy Clark.
Great news, Meriwether. Great news.
According to Jefferson's concept, Louisiana includes all the rivers of the Mississippi-Missouri system clear to their headwaters. That's thousands of miles to the western mountains.
Yes.
Come on, Billy. You should be as happy as I am. You should be telling the men to leave off work to celebrate.
You can do that after we talk. Let's go to my tent where we can have a little privacy.
All right.
There we are. Go on in.
Now, what's this all about?
Read what our esteemed General Wilkinson has to say.
Dear Mr. Clark, due to the present strict organization of the Corps of Engineers, not only would be improper, but it is impossible to offer you a commission as a captain. I find that the highest appointment I can give you is that of a second lieutenant in the Corps of Artillerists. Your rank, however, will have no effect on compensation received for traveling with Captain Lewis's Corps of Discovery. Second lieutenant. Billy, I promised you a captain's commission, and Mr. Jefferson did, too. I'm sure he knows nothing about this.
It's all Wilkinson's doing. I feel sure of that.
Billy, there's no reason to talk about the letter to anyone else. As far as I'm concerned, the only difference between us is that I'm a captain 1st United States Infantry, and you're a captain 1st Corps of Discovery.
Being a second lieutenant on paper didn't bother me too much once I had time to get used to it. I was a captain, according to everyone but Wilkinson. At 4 p.m. on May 13th, 1804, we left camp and started upriver. We had one large 55-foot keelboat and two 50-foot canoes, one white, one red. All three were packed with 44 men and more than 12,000 pounds of supplies. On shore, moving parallel to us, was our hunting detail, George Rouillard and two men. Captain Lewis would meet us at the river town of St. Charles. At the moment, he was in St. Louis at the laboratory of Dr. Antoine Saugrand, picking up small but important items for us.
3 thermometers, Captain Lewis. As far as I know, the only handmade ones in all of Louisiana.
Mr. Jefferson expects us to record temperatures all the way.
As a scientific expedition must. When you next see His Excellency, you may tell him your thermometers were made from mercury scraped from the back of an antique Parisian mirror belonging to Madame Saugrand, and the glass from that same mirror melted down and reshaped. Also tell him Madame Saugrand did not speak to me for 2 weeks.
2 weeks? But I asked you to make the thermometers only a week ago.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm anticipating the future. I calculate that my wife will remain silent another week. 2 weeks in all, huh? Then she will explode in a tirade, and I will wish again for sweet silence. Look at the matches, my friend. Take one. Scratch it briskly on the top of this stove, huh?
Why, it lights immediately.
Wait, I call it a friction match. Each splinter I dip first in sulfur and then in phosphorus. Keep them dry at all costs.
1,000 thanks for what you've done and for your ingenuity. I'm sorry Mrs. Saugrand is upset.
Oh, she'll recover.
When I see the president again, I'll tell him he owes your wife an antique French mirror. I met the expedition at St. Charles and was in time for a special visit to Farm Osage, the settlement founded by the aging Daniel Boone.
So you're moving up the Missouri and across the divide to the Pacific.
Where did you hear that, sir?
I hope you haven't mentioned that theory to anyone else, Mr. Boone.
I don't think you fooled the smart ones. Nobody gets together a fine expedition like this just to travel up the Mississippi. I wish I could go along.
We'll make a place for you if you're serious.
I wish it could be, but I'm 69. No, this is your high tide. Mine was years ago back in Kentucky. Oh, one thing. They've warned you about the Indians?
We hear the Teton Sioux can be quarrelsome.
Quarrelsome? If you underrate them to that extent, come next month and your scalp will be hanging from some Sioux lodgepole, drying.
It's that bad.
Along with the Arikaras, the Teton Sioux make up a colony of river pirates. According to how they feel, they might let you pass with only the payment of half your goods. Or they might take your goods and send you back. Or they might take your goods and kill you all.
What do you advise, Mr. Boone?
Be men. Do what you must. Pay, parley, or fight. But never stop being men.
What old Daniel Boone told us made us realize we were facing a huge task. The Teton Sioux up toward the Dakota country were only one of our obstacles if a man took the long view. But our goal was the Pacific, and it was time we got started. I gave the high sign to Billy Clark.
All right, you men. Push off! We've got miles and miles to make before sundown.
You have been listening to Horizons West, the continued story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Chapter 1, Mr. Jefferson's Dream, starred Harry Bartell as Meriwether Lewis and John Anderson as William Clark. Featured in the cast were Don Randolph, Cliff Holland, Stan Farrar, Ben Wright, Les Tremaine, Tyler McVeigh, Bill Irwin, and Dal McKinnon. Our story was written by Carley and William Tunberg and directed by William Lally. Sound patterns by Gene Twombly. Michael Rye speaking. This is the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. The American West. Once it could have been the British, Spanish, or even the Russian West. It became American primarily because of the explorations of two young Army officers, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Their pioneering journey stands as one of the great achievements in the history of the United States.
Private John Collins, Corps of Discovery, United States Army. You are charged with being drunk while posted as a member of the Guard and with permitting the theft of whiskey. Private Hugh Hall, Corps of Discovery, United States Army. You are charged with stealing whiskey this morning, 30th of June, 1804. By a two-thirds majority, a court composed of your peers has found you both guilty as charged. Private John Collins, you are sentenced to receive 100 lashes on the bare back. Private Hugh Hall, you are sentenced to receive 50 lashes on the bare back.
Sergeant Floyd?
Yes, sir.
Step over here. I'd like a private word. The sentences are too severe for the use of the regular lash, Sergeant. You'll incapacitate those two men.
I know that, Captain Lewis, but what can I do? It was the sentence of the court-martial.
And it's your duty to carry it out, but use light switches.
Yes, sir.
Guards, prepare the prisoners. Tie them to the oaks by the river.
Horizons West, the continued story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Now, with Harry Bartell as Meriwether Lewis and John Anderson as William Clark, listen to Chapter 2, The Confrontation. After they left St. Charles, Missouri, and started up the Missouri River, the first few weeks of the journey were difficult. Besides battling the swift current of the river, the men of the Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery were constantly bothered by oppressive heat, mosquitoes, sickness, and always the fear of the unknown. Captains Lewis and Clark were deeply concerned. Unless the morale of the expedition improved rapidly, only disaster would result from their inevitable meeting with the Sioux Indians.
The whipping of Privates Collins and Hall made our evening campground a tense and unpleasant place. Despite the fact that the court-martial was composed of enlisted men and headed by Sergeant Charles Floyd, resentment over the verdict seemed directed at Billy Clark and me. We were the martinets, two taskmasters leading the men farther and farther on a dangerous journey into the unknown. I looked at Billy Clark, who was drawing a map of the river we had just traversed. He grinned at me.
Poor sort of day, isn't it?
Billy, we're never going to make it past the Sioux settlements.
Maybe the men will shift their resentment from us to the Indians.
The way it is now, they'll break ranks and run. I think it's our fault morale is bad.
Our fault?
For one thing, punishments have been too severe.
The lash has been standard military punishment for centuries. The average soldier accepts it as a part of the system.
The average soldier, yes, but these men of ours are hand-picked. Whipping only makes them defiant. What we need to do is touch their pride, their self-respect.
What's that?
A raft putting into shore.
Yes, I see now. The trappers, by the look of it. 4 men in a pile of pelts taller than any one of them. It's a fortune in furs.
Captain Clark, one of the trappers is asking for you.
For me?
Says his name is Pierre Dorion.
Dorion. Bring him over here.
Yes, sir.
This Dorion is a friend of my older brother, George. He was with George during the war at Kaskaskia, Vincennes, and Detroit, I think.
Back in St. Louis, Chateau spoke of him. He's supposed to be one of the most experienced men on the river.
Captain Clark? Captain Lloyd?
Hello, Captain Clark. Last time I saw you, you were George's little brother.
I still am. You're looking healthy, Pierre Dorion.
Oh, thank you.
Meet Captain Lewis. Meriwether, Pierre here is the only man who could teach my brother George anything about Indians.
And George was the only one who could teach me anything about women. You were too young to know Billy, but George had a way with all females. Captain Louis, do you know General George?
Yes, of course.
I was with him at Kaskaskia. When, without losing a man, he compelled the British to surrender the fort. I was with him at Vincennes. What is that I smell? Venison, huh?
You'll eat with us, of course.
Of course. It will be like a banquet after eating with the Sioux night after night. I cannot stand roasted dog.
What is the story of the Sioux, Pierre?
Oh, come. We will talk later over the food, yes?
We told Dorion a little about our expedition, and he seemed interested. We talked about what lay ahead of us. By morning, we had decided that Pierre Dorion would be a valuable addition to our party.
Ah, a beautiful morning, Captain Louis, eh? A beautiful morning. But soon I must be leaving.
Captain Clark and I have been talking, Dorion. We have no one in our party who can speak the Sioux tongue.
Oh, then you will have trouble. Even though they do understand more English than they will ever admit to you.
I was wondering if we couldn't avoid that.
By taking me upriver with you?
You'd be doing the service to the American government.
What is that out here, huh?
The Louisiana country is no longer French. It belongs to the United States.
On paper, no?
Not entirely, Dorion. President Jefferson sent us out here. We represent the United States.
Thomas Jefferson? Oh, there is a good man.
I'd like you to interpret for us and then take a representative group of Sioux chiefs back to meet and negotiate with our president.
Because I like Monsieur Jefferson, because I love General George so much, I will help you. I will go back upriver, and I will take a representative of those thieves to Washington City.
As we moved up the Missouri toward its junction with the Platte River, the men's physical discomfort increased, and morale deteriorated. Everyone complained and grumbled. Then Private Willard fell asleep on guard, a capital offense. He got 25 lashes a day for 4 days, but the men were still not impressed. We approached the country of the Otos, the first big Indian tribe on our route. And the only marked change among the men was that they began to take better care of their rifles. George Drouillard, John Coulter, and George Shannon were on shore, our hunting party charged with the task of keeping us in fresh meat. Meriwether Lewis was also on shore, making notes on the flora and fauna of the area. I was with the boats.
The Platte is around that bend, Billy.
And we still haven't seen any Otos. Now, why?
Oh, I do not know. That is a tribe I know little about.
Now, that's Drouillard's signal.
Oh.
Who's that? Left rudder! Land in that sandy area. All right, move!
Well, I hope he brings more venison for the evening meal.
By the time we had landed and started to make camp, Drouillard and his party came in, heavily laden with fresh meat.
8 deer, 10 beaver. Good hunting, George.
A man cannot have bad hunting. Game is so plentiful.
Oh, we point the rifle, shoot, and you eat something every yard.
All a man needs to qualify as a good hunter in this country is a strong back to carrying the meat.
See any Otos?
No autos, but a party of Sioux passed about a mile from us.
Sure they were Sioux.
The Teton Sioux, scouting out.
3 eyes right. All day long I have read their smoke signal in the sky.
I wish morale was better. We may have to fight them.
Captain Clark, sir.
Yes, Floyd.
One of our French boatmen, La Liberté by name, says he knows the Otos and he wants permission to look for them and tell them that we're here.
Every Indian, Otto, Yanton, Teton, within 100 miles knows every step we take.
I suppose so. Meriwether, what do you think of this La Liberté?
I haven't formed an opinion. What do you think about him, George?
He wants to live with the Otos for a year. But ask Private Reed, sir. He knows La Liberté better than anyone.
Neither man has given me any trouble, sir.
Let's take a chance, fella.
Yes. Sergeant, tell La Liberté we'd like him to go. He's to bring back the Oto chief.
Very good, sir.
He can leave in the morning and meet us upriver within the week.
Yes, sir.
La Liberté, the free man. Well, there is no such thing as a free man. What a ridiculous name.
The next morning, we broke camp early and loaded the boats quickly. La Liberté was an hour on the trail, and I was about to lead my shore party onward when Private Moses Reed approached me.
Captain Lewis,
What is it, Reed?
when I packed my gear, my knife was missing. I'd like to stay and search the camp area for it, sir. I can catch up with the rest later on.
The knife can't be replaced out here. Go ahead, Reed. Find it.
Thanks, sir.
All right, men, let's move out. That evening, we camped about 6 miles up from the mouth of the Platte, had a pleasant supper, and settled down to talk.
Pierre, we know there are Indians all around us. Could the Otos be staying away because the Sioux ordered them to?
I do not think so. No doubt the Otos are cautious because this party is big and well armed.
Captain Lewis, did Reed leave his gear with anyone in your shore party?
No?
Well, it's not in the boats either. Now, he wouldn't take all that with him if he intended to come back.
How about the extra clothing?
That's gone, sir. We'll never see him again.
That is where you may be wrong, Sergeant. Tell George Drouillard to report to me.
George, Drouillard.
Billy, it looks like our first desertion.
Our second, Meriwether. George Drouillard said Reed was a friend of La Liberté. I'll wager they met at the Oto village.
Probably. Desertion's a capital offense. We can't afford to let them get away with it.
If they do, it'll be a very bad example to the others.
And we can't stand much more of that.
Sergeant Floyd say you want to see me.
George, Captain Clark and I have reason to believe that Reed and La Liberté have deserted.
Yes, sir. You told me so.
I want you to find them and bring them back, dead or alive.
My guess is La Liberté has a squaw at the Oto camp. I will need 2 or 3 men.
Take Reuben Fields, Labiche, and Bratton. Better go tell them now.
Rube Fields, Labiche, Breton. Yes, sir.
Floyd, you look pale. Is there anything wrong?
Oh, nothing but a bellyache, sir. Lately, I've been getting it after meals.
Go rest. I'll get you some medicine.
But I'm on guard duty.
Sergeant Ordway can take it for you. Do as I say.
Yes, sir.
Floyd seemed better the next morning, but after breakfast, the pain came back. Both Billy Clark and I were reasonably well versed in doctoring, but neither of us could diagnose this obscure ailment. Floyd bore it manfully, insisting upon doing his share of work. Then George Drouillard and his detail returned with one of the 2 deserters in custody, Moses Reed. La Liberté had escaped. Trooping along in colorful regalia were a number of Oto chiefs. I gave them my welcome speech, stressing that from now on the United States wanted to protect them, to live in amity with them. We presented them with gifts of tobacco and beads, and I invited them to observe our justice. Then I convened the court-martial of Private Moses Reed. Private Moses Reed, Corps of Discovery, United States Army, you are charged with desertion. How do you plead?
I was going to come back. I was trying to bring La Liberté back with him, that's all, but he wouldn't leave his woman. I ain't no deserter.
Then your plea is not guilty.
Yes, sir. Not guilty.
He could be right.
Call George Drouillard.
Hey, Captain, right here.
Tell the court how and where you found Private Reed.
We trail him to the Otto village. He had all his gear with him, and he act like he's planning to stay a while.
How do you know that, Drouillard?
Quiet down, Reed. You'll have your chance to tell your side of it. Go on, George. Anyone else in the lodge?
La Liberté, his woman, and the other squaw.
What happened when you tried to arrest Private Reed?
He fight me and try to get clear. And Private Field and myself, we got him. The squaws both blocked La Biche and Bratton long enough for La Liberté to get out and to run away.
I see. Did Reed say, "I'll never go back," or words to that effect?
Yes, sir. A couple of times.
You're a liar, Drew. You're a dirty liar.
Quiet!
The testimony of the other members of the detail, Labiche, Reuben Fields, Bratton, corroborated George Drouillard. Captain Lewis required the court to listen to a disjointed, emotional statement from Reed, then gave them the case for their deliberation. It took less than 15 minutes to reach a verdict.
Private Moses Reed, this court is unanimous in finding you guilty of desertion. You are sentenced to run the gauntlet 4 times, the gauntlet to be formed by the enlisted men of this Corps of Discovery. Then you will be dishonorably discharged from the United States Army. Without privileges, you will work as a common laborer with the expedition until such time as you can be safely sent back to civilization. Attention! Attention! Form the gauntlet.
Many thought Reed's punishment too severe, while others agreed vehemently with the court. Certainly the apathy that attended the other court-martial was missing. Perhaps the men realized at last that each had an obligation to the group as well as to himself. After the punishment was over and after the evening meal, Captain Lewis ordered a dance for the entertainment of the visiting Oto chiefs. The air crusette sawed away on his fiddle. The men started cavorting through the figures of the dance. The Otos grinned and laughed, especially when my man York, with his gift for comedy, went through his paces. Then Sergeant Floyd left the dancers and came over to me, clutching at his side.
Captain Clark, the pain's back worse than ever.
While Meriwether continued to sit with the Oto chiefs as their host, I quickly took Floyd down to the boats and made him as comfortable as possible in the keel boat. The next morning, we said goodbye to the Otos, hurrying their departure as much as we could. Then we shoved off. Both Meriwether and I stayed in the keelboat with Sergeant Floyd, who seemed to be in a kind of semi-coma.
It's getting worse.
I don't understand. Perhaps we should put back to shore.
Why? It's cooler for him in the boat.
I'd like to know what he has and why he got it. I hope it's not contagious.
Face it, Billy, we don't know enough. All we can do is watch his struggle. Either he lives or he dies.
Floyd's fever lasted several more hours. Then, as we approached a high bluff on the east bank, he emerged from his coma, not in recovery, but as if he had willed himself to speak a final time.
Captain Clark, Captain Lewis, I'm going away. Right, my brother. Still here.
August 20th, 1804, on a bluff overlooking the Missouri, The men dug Sergeant Floyd's grave. They fitted slabs of oak around his body and lowered it into the ground. Floyd's squad stood straight and tall, ready to honor him with a volley from their rifles.
Ready? Fire! This man at all times gave us proof of his devotion to duty, his firmness, honesty, and personal integrity. Nothing more can be said of any man. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Sometimes it is difficult to watch a good man go while his inferiors live on. All we can do is trust in the discretion and the superior wisdom of the Lord. Rest in peace, Charles Floyd. We returned to the boats. About 2 miles upriver, a tributary flowed strongly into the Missouri, a clean and handsome stream. We named it the Floyd River and made camp across from where its waters blended with those of the Missouri. That night, the men elected Patrick Gass to replace Sergeant Floyd. I presented him with a sergeant's warrant in the Corps of Discovery. The next day, a storm drove us many miles ahead, and the favorable winds continued for several more days until we were well into Sioux country, according to Pierre Dorion.
To be more exact, Captain Clark, this is the territory of the Yankton tribe.
The Yankton Sioux?
Oui. They are less evil and less belligerent than the Tetons, whom we will meet later on, provided the Yankton are amiable.
The next few weeks, we ran into more signs of Indians. Their spoor along the shore, where I was finding samples of an interesting mineral richness, alum, cobalt, copper, pyrites, and of course the smoke signals ahead of us constantly. We tried to select campsites with an eye to defense.
I've been watching Gass. He seems to be taking hold of Floyd's job as if he were born to be a sergeant.
I think morale's improving, too. The men are more like a team.
Nobody wants to be like Moses Reed. He's a constant example to them of what it means to be shorn of rank and privileges.
Alan, Luis, Captain Clark.
What is it?
George, what's the matter?
Private Shannon, young Shannon. He is lost.
Lost?
Yes, we spent hours looking for him.
This is no place to be lost in the Sioux country.
George, who's the best tracker in the Corps? Coulter?
Oui, Johnny Coulter.
Send him out after Shannon.
Several days later, with Shannon and Coulter still missing, we had our first encounter with the Yankton Sioux. One of their warriors approached Captain Lewis, spoke to him through Pierre Dorion, and a conference was arranged. It was held near the river where we had easy access to the boats. After gifts were exchanged and speeches were made, Private Pierre Cruzat got out his violin and astounded the Indians with his music. They were amazed by York's smooth black skin and huge muscles, and their jaws fell slack at the sight of the dog, Scannon.
There is dog enough to feed the whole Yankton nation.
The man who kills Scannon would have to kill Meriwether Lewis first. Come to think of it, he'd also have to kill me and at least half the men.
Oh, this dog is very well protected.
Very well. I wish Coulter would come back with George Shannon.
Oh, it is something to worry about. Perhaps the savages have captured them and are secretly holding them to use in bargaining with you, huh?
Clark took over the parleying with Dorion beside him to interpret. He inquired after our 2 missing men, but even when the question was emphasized with the gift of more tobacco and beads, there was no information about them. However, Clark did manage to convince the Yankton Sioux to send an emissary back to Washington with Pierre Dorion. The next day, we said our goodbyes to the helpful Dorion, who remained with the Yanktons, and continued upriver. On September 6th, John Coulter returned to report that he could not find George Shannon. But a short time later...
Meriwether, do you see something up there?
Where?
Over there.
No? Wait, yes I do. A man.
A white man. Shannon!
Look out! Right, Gunner! Punch him once into those doors!
Private Shannon was thin and weary, but unharmed. He had subsisted for 12 days on wild berries and one rabbit he'd killed by shooting it with a sharpened stick. He'd run out of musket balls. Originally, he had become separated from the hunting party while stalking a deer and had followed a fresh Indian trail north, thinking it was the trail of the expedition shore party. Only when exhaustion made him rest were we able to catch up with him.
On September 23rd, according to my maps, we were 1,100 miles up the Missouri. Our camp was strategically defensible, and we kept sentries on duty around the clock. Then 5 Teton Sioux braves showed themselves and went through an elaborate pantomime of putting their bows and arrows and old trade muskets aside. Meriwether Lewis went out with a twist of tobacco for each one, and in sign language asked them to bring their chiefs to a peace conference the following day.
Welcome, warriors of the Teton Sioux. Welcome. I come to you from the great chief of the 17 states of America to extend to you the hand of brotherhood and amity.
I didn't like the look of it. 2 chiefs and their aides faced us. Black Buffalo and an evil, arrogant man called the Partisan. Behind them in a semicircle which kept our backs to the river were hundreds of warriors. Their mood was almost as needling and as arrogant as that of the Partisan.
They will supply you with all that you may need.
We need whiskey. Whiskey! Whiskey! Right in big boats.
I don't think they understood a word of what I said.
I tell them what you mean, but they make up their minds in advance. They are closed against you.
No war. No fight. No kill.
The air guns, Capitan. That might impress them.
Whiskey! Whiskey!
Bratton, put a slug into that tree beside the Partisan.
He shoot deep into tree with magic. No noise done. Hole thick and long, as big as finger.
Ordway, bring a bottle of whiskey.
Did you hear that, Partisan? For our friends, a drink of whiskey, if that's what they want. We have fine friendship medallions from President Jefferson for you.
No, Jefferson. Ride in big boat.
Ordway trotted in and handed a quart to me, and I gave it to the Partisan, who promptly broke it open and began to guzzle it.
Whiskey, good. Want boat ride. Want trade good. Want good gun. We take all good. All. We take all boat. All. Jefferson, Paleface, go back down river on foot. Go.
Then the Partisan made the mistake of trying to force me to one side as he moved towards the boats. I pushed him back and drew my sword.
Pryor, man the swivel guns.
Pryor and his men leaped to obey, training the guns on the warriors who stopped their advance, but retaliated by notching arrows in their bows. Then the Partisan grabbed for the mooring rope of the keelboat.
Not go. Boat mine. Beef, tobacco, mine.
We ran forward, and I jerked the rope from his hand. I threatened him with my sword.
Everyone in the boats, prepare to fire. Partisan, you see white man's big guns?
Me see.
Kill many Sioux with one boom.
Whiskey. Me want whiskey. Plenty whiskey. And me let you go upriver.
Get out of here.
Tobacco. Tobacco.
I took up a twist of the stuff and flung it squarely in his face.
We pushed into midstream and headed upriver without a fight and without paying tribute. Firmness and a little honest anger in the face of the toughest of the Sioux chiefs had bought us our passage. In his own right, Billy Clark was as tough as the Partisan.
And we knew well that those smoke signals which preceded us would be supplemented by Indian runners carrying the word that white men of a new and stronger breed were coming. Men who would not be intimidated.
You have been listening to Horizons West, the continued story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Chapter 2, The Confrontation, starred Harry Bartell as Meriwether Lewis and John Anderson as William Clark. Featured in the cast were Carl Swenson, Jack Edwards, Jack Crucian, Sam Edwards, and Dal McKennon. Our story was written by Carly and William Tunberg and directed by William Lally. Sound patterns by Gene Twombly. Michael Rye speaking. This is the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. American West. Once it could have been the British, Spanish, or even the Russian West. It became American primarily because of the explorations of two young Army officers, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Their pioneering journey stands as one of the great achievements in the history of the United States.
York, come out of there. You'll have those Indians swarming all over the boat looking for you.
Captain Lewis, sir? Tell him I'm out hunting buffalo with Mr. George Juilliard. Tell him my master, Captain Clark, took me to the village to meet the big chief Black Cat.
Captain Clark is coming this way right now, and you met Black Cat yesterday.
But, sir, I don't want to go out there.
We're spending the winter with the Mandans, and you may as well get used to them. You ought to be glad they like you.
The winter, sir? I won't be able to stand it that long. All that flexing of muscle and lifting heavy men over my head to show how strong I am.
I want you, York.
Sir, I'm plumb tired out. Besides, I'm your servant, not theirs.
Go on. You know you love all that attention. Get out there and make them happy.
That's an order, sir?
It is.
All right, sir. But this time I'm only lifting little squaws.
He hasn't had this much fun in his whole life.
At least not since we left the Arikara village.
Speaking of Arikaras, where's Chief Kakawita?
Talking with Newman, I guess. He feels sorry for Newman. He told me Arikaras would never whip a man and take away his warrior status for the minor offense of talking back to a superior. I tried to explain that Newman had also denounced the expedition, the army, the entire nation. But Kakawita couldn't see how that increased the offense. He simply doesn't have the same conception of nationality that we do. How'd it go with Black Cat?
Oh, he'll hold a council for Kakawita. We may arrange peace between the Mandans and the Arikaras yet.
I hope so.
The only thing really bothers me, that agent of the British Northwest Trading Company, McCracken. He knows we know he's in the village, but he keeps on avoiding a meeting.
The land is ours. Sooner or later, he'll have to come to us.
Horizons West, the continued story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Now, with Harry Bartell as Meriwether Lewis and John Anderson as William Clark, listen to Chapter 3, Dakota Winter. October 1804. The news that Lewis and Clark had outfaced and overawed the Teton Sioux preceded the expedition up the Missouri River, turning the belligerent Arikaras into genial hosts, and now the Mandans, who lived in the Dakota country, into stout advocates. Only the presence of the Britisher, Hugh McCracken, caused the two captains worry. Here was a man who might upset their plans, depending upon the extent of his dislike.
In the cleared area before the rows of rounded earthen huts, a fire was crackling and the chiefs and warriors of the Mandans had assembled. Kakawita, our Arikara friend, was in the center along with Billy Clark. As I took my seat beside Black Cat, chief of the Mandans, I saw Hugh McCracken standing beside one of the lodges.
My people, listen. Men of courage and goodwill are among us. The white chieftains, Lewis and Clark, and their warriors of the United States. They will winter here. They will teach us their ways of peace through strength. They will bring us their traders to buy our furs and supply our needs. Now, hear the words of Captain Lewis.
We come among you with greetings from Thomas Jefferson, Big Chief of the 17 states of America. We bring you protection and prosperity, only as long as they are fair and honorable will the traders of France, of England, of Spain, of Canada be permitted to deal with you. For this, we ask only friendship and that you live in peace with the other tribes. We have talked to the Arikaras, and they want peace. With us is their chief, Kakawita, who wishes to speak to his Mandan brothers.
Let him be heard.
My brothers, I have made much talk with my people and great white chiefs. Wise men have made us see reasons why there has been trouble between Mandan and Arikara. Each time we have made war, it has been because of evil counsel of Teton Sioux, who grow strong while we bleed each other. Let us resist Sioux deceit. Let us have peace. Let us smoke together.
Those are fair words, Arikara. But what if this alliance is made and the Teton Sioux frown upon it? Will you do as you have done before and kill us because you fear the Sioux?
No! No! At last, our eyes are open. We will not fear the Sioux when we can come to you in friendship.
Hear me, people of the Mandans. Accept the word of your brother. We, captains of the United States, will guarantee this peace. If the Sioux attack, we will punish them.
My people, the great white captains have spoken. Pass the pipe. We will smoke.
During the next few days, we surveyed the area near the river, above and below the Mandan villages, for a suitable site for our winter quarters. And Billy Clark and I decided on a location which was heavily forested with cottonwoods.
Looks good to me, Meriwether. Plenty of trees for building. No cartage problem.
Remember how we built when we were serving under General Anthony Wayne?
Every building was a fort and could be defended.
And that's what we want here. Strong houses, a tall wall of pickets, sentry ramps, gun ports, visibility on all sides. We'll need 5 or 6 good-sized Hey, what's the matter with York?
Captain Clark. Captain Clark.
What is it, York? What is it?
Chief Blackcat says to tell you right away. The Englishman McCracken is leaving. He goes someplace on the Assiniboine River.
Back to Northwest Trading Company headquarters.
York, has McCracken actually left?
Not yet, sir. He's still packing.
I'm writing a letter to his superiors. I want you to put it into McCracken's hands before he leaves.
Yes, sir.
A letter, Meriwether?
A brief statement of intent. We bought this land from the French. We will defend it. November temperatures in this North Country were quite cold, down around the 0 mark, oftener than we liked. According to the Mandans, this was mild weather. It would get much, much colder. As cold as 40 to 50 degrees below 0. Despite this, morale among the men was high. They worked long, hard hours in a race against the weather, building a stout Fort Mandan, while Sergeant Gass and 10 others worked equally hard on the dugout canoes.
It is fine morning, Captain Lewis.
Dakota Winter, how are you?
I have been watching Sergeant Gass and his men. Making a big log into a boat is hard task. It asks much of the worker. He must be skilled, patient. He must always see a canoe before him, not a log.
Sergeant Gass has all those qualities.
So does your prisoner Newman, the disgraced warrior who will be sent downriver next spring when the ice has melted. He, too, has the fine qualities of the sergeant.
Newman was given a fair trial and found guilty by a court made up of his fellows. You want me to nullify that?
No, Captain. Merely observe him from time to time.
Cold November gave way to colder December. But this did not stop the Mandan young men, dressed only in breech clouds, from racing about on the ice, playing a brutal game called lacrosse. Meriwether went out on the ice with the lacrosse players, not for love of sport, but to learn enough to write about it in his carefully detailed cultural study of the Indians. He gathered much linguistic information about their speech, made up dictionaries to go with his summaries of various Aboriginal religions, customs, laws, and social behavior. We had accepted Robert Frazier of the temporary escort as a permanent member of the Corps to fill the vacancy created by the death of Charles Floyd. And we enlisted a young trader who stopped en route to St. Louis, Baptiste Lepage, to replace the disgraced John Newman. We still lacked a man to replace Moses Reed, the convicted deserter, when a heavy-set Frenchman of about 40 came to the stockade with his 2 wives and asked to speak to the commander.
What a thing I've seen, sir. Do you know one of your men is risking his life playing lacrosse with those savages?
Well, that's Captain Lewis, my co-commander. I'm Captain Clark. What can I do for you?
I am Charbonneau, Captain Clark. Toussaint Charbonneau. I have many, many years of experience in the wilderness, and I understand the geography of the Mississippi and the Missouri, and on the west to the divide.
Touched
I am an
with
excellent
a French
hunter.
inflection, the words poured out a statement of his qualifications for a job. I watched him and looked at the 2 shy Indian women who had entered a few steps behind him. They were obviously his wives, one tired, middle-aged, the other young and pretty. The young one was in the early months of pregnancy.
Louisiana, the Americans, where my great experience and many skills can be properly used.
Hello, Billy. Captain Lewis, this is Toussaint Charbonneau, trader, hunter, guide, interpreter. The ladies are his wives.
Delighted, Captain.
Mr. Charbonneau wants a job.
You told him we have all the people we need, didn't you?
Well, I was about to.
I'm sorry, but I heard you had no one who could speak Shoshone.
Who said we needed anyone for that?
Oh, there are the persistent rumors which we hear from St. Louis.
Mr. Charbonneau, you imply that you speak the Shoshone tongue.
Oh, no, sir. No white man has ever visited the Shoshone, let alone try to learn their language. However, I can offer the next best thing in the person of my youngest wife, Sacagawea. She will accompany me. She speaks Shoshone because she is a Shoshone. I won her in a game of chance from the Gros Ventre some months ago. She also speaks English.
Won her in a game?
5 years ago, a Gros Ventre raiding party took her from her own people.
She's pregnant. She can't go on a long trek.
Oh, by the time the river ice melts next spring, she will have borne me a son.
A baby can't stand a long trip either.
Oh, this baby can, Captain, huh? He will be French and Indian, and the son of Toussaint Charbonneau.
You'll work your heart out if you go with us.
I'm not afraid of hard work. And did I mention, huh? I'm an excellent cook.
All right, Charbonneau, we'll try it. $25 per month, and keep.
Also keep for Sacagawea, huh?
Yes. Keep for Sacagawea.
Both Charbonneau and Sacagawea helped us put the expedition equipment inside the new stockade. Our friends the Mandans brought us gifts of food, choice meat, vegetables, and pemmican, and Indian dried meat food that was delicious. We stored all perishables outside the buildings where the below freezing temperatures kept meats fresh and a wooden lattice kept away marauding creatures. Hunting parties went out to augment the supply, and one was attacked by a Sioux raiding party. Kakawita, the Arikara chief, was one of the hunters.
Captain Lewis, there were only 3 of us. Bratton, Newman, me. Newman came only to load the pack animals and do squaw work. But his courage saved us.
His courage saved you? What do you mean by that?
The Sioux, nearly 100 of them, had taken our meat and 2 of our horses and had forced Bratton to give them his knife. Newman threatened them and made them return the knife. Then they left.
Thank you for telling me, Kakawita.
Tomorrow, I go back to my village with 3 chieftains from the Mandans to smoke the pipe of peace with my people. Sometimes men learn from their errors.
Kakawita and the Mandan ambassadors left for the Arikara settlements to the south of us, and Charbonneau and his wife Sacagawea moved into the fort. The second wife, Otter Woman, did not come along. Plainly, Charbonneau had sent her back to her people. After a few days of shy silence, Sacagawea began to answer questions from me and from Billy Clark, as long as her husband was present.
Sacagawea, is it many moons from here to your people? Can you go there on the river in boats?
It is many moons. Then comes the big falling of water over the steep bluffs, making much noise and a mist like rain.
Yes, go on, Sacagawea. The big fall of water, there must be a portage for boats around it.
Come in.
Black Cat.
Come in, Black Cat.
Health be with you, my friend.
Health be with you. What has brought you to Fort Mandan?
I am deeply troubled. English traders of the Northwest Company are in my village. There is bad talk from one of them called La France.
They threaten you?
La France says the Americans lie to us. All American trade will be controlled by the Sioux.
Do you believe that, Black Cat?
No, but others may. Our neighbors, the Minatari, are already disturbed.
Where'll we find this La France? How many men does he bring?
They are 7. La France is aide to the leader, Antoine Larocque. In their trade goods, they bring British flags and medals. Even now, this Larocque is on his way here to speak to you.
Larocque coming here?
It is true.
You will excuse me, gentlemen.
No, we won't, Charbonneau. Stay where you are.
Now tell us why you're afraid of this Larocque.
Oh, it is not fear exactly, huh? It is only that in past seasons I've worked for him. And he will be angry when he finds I have taken employment from you.
You have a right to work for you, please.
My friend, I must not seem to take sides in this. Not at present.
You wish to go?
Yes.
Then go. You are a good friend.
Thank you. Good day, my friend.
We permitted Sacagawea to leave the room. Indeed, Charbonneau suggested it. And then the three of us sat back to wait for Larocque.
Charbonneau, what sort of man is this Larocque?
Young, adventurous, greedy for quick profits. In many ways, he is the typical French-Canadian who has joined with the English in the hope that he has chosen the winning side. He fancies himself clever and urban, which he really is not.
Captain Clark, or is it Captain Lewis?
Both of us are here. Come in, Larocque.
You expected me. You know my name.
Now I understand. It was you, Charbonneau, who heard I was here and informed our American friends.
Oh, no, Larocque, no. But I wish you to meet my employers, Captain Meriwether Lewis, Captain William Clark.
I am honored.
Sit down, Mr. Larocque, and tell us what's on your mind.
Does one have to have something on his mind to seek out a company of other white men in a land of benighted savages?
You have come with 7 men from your base on the Assiniboine. You have allowed your man LaFrance to spread falsehoods against us among the people you call benighted savages.
Captain, that is a most unfriendly statement.
We'll expect you to put a muzzle on this, LaFrance, and since Louisiana is now a part of the United States, there will be no distribution of George III medallions and Union Jacks to the Indians.
As you wish. I will give out beads and vermilion, which are more popular anyway. I am here not as a newcomer, but as a man who has for years conducted trade with the Mandans and the Minatarees. For several years I have used the same interpreter, but now I learn that you have hired him.
Well, we might loan him to you from time to time.
That would be most kind.
If Mr. Charbonneau is willing, of course.
Oh, I'm willing, if I receive additional pay from Monsieur Larocque.
Oh, very well, Charbonneau. I plan a brief trip to the Minotarie villages on the Knife River. You will meet me day after tomorrow in the Upper Mandan village, provided, of course, you can be spared for a month.
That is agreeable, Captain Clark.
We'll be right here when you get back.
Thank you. Day after tomorrow, Larocque. Now, if you gentlemen will excuse me.
Of course.
Charbonneau is good with the Minatarees because he understands them.
As long as his personal life doesn't interfere with his efficiency.
Exactly.
May I offer you a dram of whiskey?
Oh, yes, thank you. I couldn't help but notice your fine equipment. And you have admirably disciplined troops. Stalwart, strong, capable of anything.
There you are, Larocque. Very well, thank you.
To your long journey.
Our long journey?
You are exploring to the west.
Seems we can't hide it any longer.
I am an experienced man in the wilderness. Why don't you take me along?
Are you serious?
I am.
If you want to go west, you'll have to organize your own expedition.
Perhaps I will. By the way, I have been reliably informed that Britain has a right of access to the Mississippi and Missouri river systems.
You've been grossly misinformed. Both river systems are entirely within the territorial limits of the United States.
Isn't that a matter for the surveyors and the cartographers to determine?
Captain Clark is a surveyor and a cartographer. For your information, Larocque, Louisiana extends to the northern tributary of the Assiniboine, the Qu'Appelle River.
That's as far north as Lake Winnipeg. I find that impossible to accept.
But it's a fact, Larocque. You'll be glad to know that our president, Thomas Jefferson, has decided on a policy of free trade in Louisiana for the present. That means the English may continue to trade with the Indians as long as they treat them fairly.
I refuse to accept you as either a political or economic judge. However, I also refuse to quarrel. I thank you for the use of Charbonneau. I will see that LaFrance keeps a rein on his tongue. Good day, gentlemen.
Charbonneau went with Larocque and his traders, and during the month that he was gone, weather took hold of the fort. Even my big active dog Scannon preferred to stay indoors. On Christmas Day, celebrated with extra rations and a salute from the swivel gun, it was so cold that the river ice groaned, cottonwood boughs boomed like musketry, and the guard had to be changed every hour to keep the men on duty from freezing to death. And then one windless, icy day in early January, Charbonneau returned. Unsmiling, nervous, he approached Billy and me in our workroom.
Gentlemen, may I speak to you both? Of course.
You look worried.
My friend, Larocque, says he asked to join the expedition, and you refused. He's a good man. Would be of great value.
To the British or us?
To us, of course.
We can't take the chance of hiring a man so dedicated to British objectives.
I see. There is another subject, huh? When I agreed to go, there were things we did not discuss.
And now you want to speak up.
You are getting two people instead of one.
We hired you, not your wife. We agreed to take her along when you asked.
Yes, but she will render valuable service. Remember, she speaks Shoshone.
You want more money?
Yes. And I will not do heavy lifting or pull boat. Huh? I am not a common laborer.
We all pull and carry heavy weights when necessary.
I am a specialist, and I must have $50 for the two of us.
Billy, you haven't said anything.
I've been too amazed.
Do you agree we can struggle along without him?
I think so.
Charbonneau, you're fired. You have until noon to get your gear out of the fort.
But what will you do when you reach Shoshone country?
Use sign language. Now get out of here. You actually believe he's so important he can dictate to us?
Either that or Larocque paid him to do it.
That could be an act of harassment, something to make our progress just a little bit more difficult.
Who is it?
Charbonneau.
Come in.
I am back.
So we see.
I wish to say that, I spoke hastily, heedlessly. Oh, I cannot take my wife out into this cold. I wish to remain.
Very well. But if pulling or towing or heavy lifting is called for, you will do your share.
Yes, more than my share.
We're taking you back because of your wife.
Because of Sacagawea?
We don't want her out in the cold.
January gave way to February, and the fort became almost a factory of preparations for spring. In contrast to Moses Reed, the sullen-acting convicted deserter, John Newman, discharged for insubordination, worked as eagerly and as hard as any of the men assured of a place in the upriver contingent.
Meriwether, I think Newman's trying to make up for his mistake.
I know, he has for months.
Or should we give him a second chance?
I don't know, Billy.
Neither do I.
Billy Clark took over direct supervision of the extra boatmen and soldiers, 14 of them, who would take the keel boat and its valuable cargo downriver to St. Louis. Aboard would be all the information we'd collected to date from Mr. Jefferson, as well as specimens of flora and fauna, and the two specimens of disobedience, Reed and Newman.
In February, a troubled Charbonneau brought Sacagawea to us. She was undergoing labor pains. Although Meriwether and I had considerable practical experience in medicine, this would be our first attempt at obstetrics. Sacagawea was long hours in labor, and we began to worry about losing her. Until George Drouillard recalled an old Indian method of bringing on the birth. In the village, we secured rattles from the tail of a diamondback, pulverized them into a powder. With some skepticism, I mixed the powder in water and gave it to Sacagawea to drink. And within 10 minutes, she delivered the child.
Here, look at him, Sacagawea.
Him, Sacagawea. Boy!
Sacagawea named the boy Baptiste. Billy, immediately fond of the bright-eyed little fellow, nicknamed him Pompey because he was such a soldier about getting born. And then winter began to soften into spring. The ice broke up. Noisy formations of birds began to fly north. On a gray day in March, we gathered on the bank of the river for the departure of the keel boat. A number of the Mandans came to watch. Also Larocque, who took in everything with the greatest of interest. Then John Newman leaped out of the boat and came to us.
Captain Lewis, Captain Clark,
I'm sorry. I tried to show you how I felt.
We know, Newman.
I want to go on with you. Please, sir?
We're going into the unknown. We can't be sure of what we'll have to face. A man who cracked under strain once could do so again. I'm sorry, we can't take it.
But, Captain...
You heard the order. Now, back in the boat.
Yes, sir.
That was a hard decision to make, Meriwether.
There's so much at stake I had to turn him down.
Well, you were right.
In another week, we had loaded our boats and were poised on the riverbank for our start. Black Cat and several Mandans came to bid us goodbye.
You will return?
Yes, Black Cat. A year, perhaps less.
My people are sad.
That means we are friends.
Good fortune go with you.
Thank you.
All set, Meriwether. Men, we are about to penetrate unexplored country of at least 2,000 miles in width. Let's get on with it.
You have been listening to Horizons West, the continued story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Chapter 3, Dakota Winter, starred Harry Bartell as Meriwether Lewis and John Anderson as William Clark. Featured in the cast were Sebastian Cabot, Helen Gerald, Bill Keane, Cliff Holland, Howard Culver, and John Cedar. Our story was written by Carl A. and William Tunberg and directed by William Lally. Sound patterns by Gene Twombly. Michael Rye speaking. This is the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. American West. Once it could have been the British, Spanish, or even the Russian West. It became American primarily because of the explorations of two young Army officers, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Their pioneering journey stands as one of the great achievements in the history of the United States.
What's that sail cruise that? You'll upset us in this wind.
You wish to handle the boat, Charbonneau?
No, but I want you to stop taking chances. My wife and my baby are aboard, and I cannot swim.
Stop worrying, Charbonneau. Cruzat is playing that sail as expertly as he does his violin. He'll get us extra miles today.
Less hauling and pulling when the wind dies away, Charbonneau. Who's that? Want to play the fiddle tonight?
Oh, best of two. Captain Louis Winter.
I'll make you a bargain. Get us 25 miles and you can play, the men can dance, and I'll order a dram issued to each man. Scanner, quiet.
Who's that antelope, sir?
Antelope?
There, in the river.
A good fat buck, sir. Can I send the dog after him?
You would kill the captain's dog, Windsor.
Don't worry about Scannon, Charbonneau. We pulled an antelope out of the river once before you joined the expedition. All right, Scannon, go get him.
don't know about you, Captain, but I'm tired of buffalo meat every night for supper. Will you look at that dog swim?
Suppose the current switched him downstream to the opposite shore.
That's Gannon. He'll come back to the boat. If he doesn't, we'll go help him.
Look, he's got that antelope.
Horizons West, the continued story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Now with Harry Bartell as Meriwether Lewis and John Anderson as William Clark. Listen to Chapter 4, Into the Unknown. April 26, 1805. It was 3 weeks since the Corps of Discovery left their winter quarters near the Mandan villages in what is now the state of North Dakota. Favorable winds had brought them over 300 miles up the Missouri into more unsettled country, unexplored by the white man.
That night we made camp opposite the mouth of a river which poured swiftly into the Missouri. Billy Clark identified it as the Yellowstone, from descriptions given us by the Mandan Indians. Along with the buffalo meat provided by George Dreyar's rifle, we had antelope for supper provided by Scannon, who lay by the fire.
Yeah, Scannon.
Sure you want him to have that, George?
He earned it, Captain Lewis. No longer am I, George Dreyar, the best hunter in this corps. Oh, by the way, from now on it will be wise to keep the dog close to you, sir. We are in grizzly bear country. Scannon might make the mistake of going after one of them.
He might. Right now, he's not afraid of anything.
Excuse me, Captain Lewis, but Krizat says we came 30 miles today.
28, by my reckoning.
28? Thank you, sir. Anyhow, Krizat wants to know if we should get out his fiddle.
28's more than 25, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Tell Sergeant Ordway to issue a drink to each man.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
You're letting them dance tonight?
They need fun and relaxation. The minute the wind stops, they'll be pulling the boats upriver, and they won't have enough energy left to dance.
You're right, Meriwether. George, the Indians say grizzlies are the most dangerous of all animals. The Mandans go in bands to hunt them.
Riflemen should do the same. A grizzly can keep charging even with a dozen shots in his body. Only a ball to the brain stops him dead.
I suppose we'll have to go after a few of them in the interest of science. We'll need some specimens for Mr. Jefferson, at least the bones and the skin.
The grizzly I saw this morning was at least 8 feet tall, and I guess his weight is about 1,000 pounds.
Excuse me, Captain Lewis, but I brought a dram for George Dreyar.
Thank you, Windsor. Thank you.
Now, where's mine? Where's Captain Lewis's?
But Captain Lewis said issue whiskey to the men.
Officers aren't men?
Well, yes, sir. I mean, no.
You know, Windsor, officers can be human. Bring us some, too.
Yes, sir.
I hope they're having a good time.
You can tell that by looking at them. Billy, it's kind of miraculous the way they can forget both past and future ordeals for the joys of the moment. The next day was without wind, but the current thrust at the boats with undiminished power. Billy Clark ordered men on the oars and the poles, and stout lines, some of rope and some of elk skin, were run from the prows of the boats to the shore, where men strained on them to pull the boats upstream.
All right, men, put your backs into it.
Because we all shared the work equally, I put my back into it, too.
Watch it, Captain Lewis. Prickly pear up ahead.
I know, Windsor.
All right, heave! Heave! Oh! Backs into it there, backs into it. Heave!
I went through the prickly pear because it was the only path a man could follow and still keep the power of his legs and back into the tow rope. I felt the thorns jabbing through my tough buffalo hide moccasins, and I almost indulged myself in the luxury of crying out in pain. Instead, I arched my muscles against the rope across my shoulders, and within a couple of hours I had forgotten the pain in my feet in favor of the pain in my lungs.
All right, men. Tie the boats. Take yourselves a rest.
Windsor and I tied our boat and then flopped to the ground. Immediately, he got out his knife and began digging the thorns from his feet.
12 of them, Captain. I sure hope the next stretch is muddy.
Yes, I got you beat by 5, Windsor.
17? Better hope it's muddy, sir.
The following day, I stayed on shore to verify certain geographical features described by the Mandan. Noting signs of bear, I armed myself with rifle, knife, and my espontu, a short spear hatchet issued to all infantry officers. I followed the Missouri to where a small stream tumbled into the main river from the north. Inland a few miles, it would be broken by rapids. If it was the stream the Mandans had named the Medicine River. I came across a buffalo cow. Not knowing how far away the rapids were, I decided to provide myself with food. It was a good clean shot which dropped the beast in her tracks, and I moved toward a potential lunch, supper, and breakfast. Then I heard the grizzly in turn. The sound of my rifle had angered the huge creature, and he was lumbering toward me. I swung my rifle upward, only to remember that I had fired it and had not reloaded. I ran as fast as I could through the woods. The bear was about to run me down. I angled toward the rapids, death of a different kind if I should plunge into them. In desperation, I dropped my empty rifle and presented the oncoming monster with the lethal end of my espontu. For some unaccountable reason, or perhaps it was the intervention of God, the grizzly stopped, looked at me, turned, and ran away. I reloaded my rifle and moved on upriver. Once more, I sensed something stalking and caught a backward glimpse of a large panther-like animal. I shot him dead, and then came upon a vast area taken over entirely by prickly pear. I had verified the river, I told myself. No use tearing my feet apart. I started back toward the main park. It was very late at night when I reached the sleeping camp, toting buffalo meat for myself and whoever else might want some for breakfast.
Who goes there?
Lewis, Meriwether Lewis.
Come on in.
Buffalo meat.
You look worn out.
I am. I verified the Medicine River and was attacked by a grizzly.
You got him, obviously, or you wouldn't be here.
He caught me with an unloaded rifle, but he changed his mind and ran away. After cornering me, too. I think perhaps the Almighty stepped in on my side.
Meriwether, you are a lucky man.
I know.
Had supper?
No.
Let me fry you one of those buffalo steaks.
You know, Billy, I think I'd rather fight 2 Indians any day than 1 grizzly.
I know I would. Big ones, anyway.
I guess they all are when they're after you.
Before I put on the meat, how about a dram?
I could use one.
Well, I'll have one with you.
I tossed a few sticks on the fire and watched the flames twist and dart and grow as they seized on the wood. As I do occasionally, I blessed the unknown human who first stumbled upon the secret of making fire millenniums and millenniums ago. Fire and the wheel, the 2 prime discoveries of man.
2 thimbles and a bottle. Pour, Meriwether.
With pleasure. Billy, fire or the wheel, which is the greater discovery?
Neither. Whiskey. Here's to your kind-hearted grizzly bear.
With one swipe of a paw, he could have eliminated me. Here's to the paw he didn't raise.
The hardest animal in the world to kill, and you with an unloaded rifle.
Even if it had been loaded, I'd have had to hit him in the eye to drop him with a single shot.
George Juilliard did it once.
No, I thought of that on the way in. I realize now what a tremendous feat that was.
Master Hunter.
I came to another conclusion about the grizzly. The thing that makes him so dangerous isn't just his physical ability, it's his unpredictable nature.
You mean his intelligence?
Yes. You have to be intelligent to be unpredictable. I suppose he turned away because he didn't like my human smell.
Well, it all points up one great need for men like us, men who go wandering out in the wilderness.
What's that, Billy?
A third or fourth great discovery or invention, a dependable, practical repeating rifle.
For days, adverse weather conditions continued, and we were forced to use the tow ropes constantly. Every man in the Corps limped about on sore and lacerated feet. Then, on May 14th, we were awakened by a breeze caressing our faces.
Feel that, Meriwether?
Praying it turns into a wind.
Come on, everybody. Everybody up. On your feet. All right, let's go.
By the time we pushed off from the shore, the breeze had quickened. Our sails filled, and we scudded along upriver.
Any suggestions about playing sail, Charbonneau?
Mon Dieu, Cruzat. Surely you can increase our pace. Surely you can extract more from so brisk a wind.
The wind held. By noon, we were sure it would hold the rest of the day and maybe longer. And Billy and I broke a rule which we had followed until this moment. We both went ashore at the same time to catch up on the botanizing.
That's a fine day. I'll have no trouble with the boats.
With this wind, we'll have to walk a good 10 miles to catch up to their evening camp.
Hey, Meriwether, look. I've never seen a grass like this. If it is a true grass.
Sheath leaves. I'd say it is family Graminia, all right, but this particular variety is new to me, too. We better take a few specimens. Billy, it's a big white boat. They're in trouble.
What's Charbonneau doing at the tiller?
Into the wind, Charbonneau, into the wind.
He can't hear you.
We both continued to yell and ran down to the edge of the water, although those in the boat were too far away to pay us any heed. It was a frightening sight. Charbonneau made no move to control the helm, and the boat, at the mercy of the wind, capsized.
Most of our medicines are in that boat.
Then a fortunate gust of wind righted the large canoe, and Cruzat, pointing what certainly must have been a wet pistol at Charbonneau, made him take the tiller and obey instructions.
Look at Sacagawea.
Calmly, the Shoshone woman held her baby in the crook of one arm and used her hands to scoop up and save articles which threatened to drift away from the partially flooded boat. While the men bailed, Cruzat browbeat Charbonneau into beaching the craft. We ran down to the boat in time to keep Cruzat from attacking Charbonneau.
Here, no dog, I will break your head wide open.
Try it, fiddler, try it.
Stop it. All right, that's enough. That's enough.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Captain, but you're right.
You men, Fields, Lafarge, Shields, McNeil, unload the boat. Put out the gear to dry.
Winter, start a fire.
Yes, sir.
Cruzat, I want to know what happened.
Well, sir, I was in charge of the boat. I supposed either you or Captain Clark told Charbonneau to take the helm.
Rouillard had it all morning, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
I assigned you to your post, Rouillard. Why didn't you resume it after the noon meal?
Well, Charbonneau act like he belonged there. He say it was his turn at the tiller.
After this, nobody assume anything without verifying it. Is that clear?
Yes, Captain.
Yes, sir.
Charbonneau, did I say anything that gave you the idea I wanted you with that tiller?
No, sir.
Then why did you do it?
Well, sir, boats fascinate me. I want to be in them. I want to steer them. I'll be all right except for a fear of the water.
If you ever touch the sail or the tiller of a boat again without orders, I'll have you shot.
The wind increased, but of course we were compelled to spend the afternoon drying the contents of the boat instead of sailing briskly upriver. Luckily, we lost only a few items, all medicine. And by night, we had repacked everything and covered it against what proved to be a thunderstorm. We camped under a thick stand of trees. While fires were made and supper started, we were protected against sudden onslaughts of rain by the interlaced canopy of branches overhead. It had been a frustrating day, and the moment the evening meal was over, the men sought out their blankets. Feeling wakeful, wondering how much we would have to endure before reaching the Rocky Mountains, I took the first watch. The camp was heavily asleep. I remained under the biggest of the trees where Billy Clark, George Rouillard, Cruzat, and several others were sleeping. Scannon lay near me. Scannon, be quiet. I want to wake the whole camp. The dog pushed to his feet. He stared at me, the tree, then back at me, as if he were trying to tell me something. Now the men about me were beginning to get up. I'm first Scannon, and then me.
What's wrong with that dog, Captain?
I think we'd better get clear of the tree. Fast.
All right, all the way, George. You're not in the clear.
Yes, sir! We reached safety just in time as lightning struck the tree, which came crashing to the ground. The noise awakened the entire camp. For a moment, while the others rushed to surround us, we who were directly concerned were silent. Then Cruzat managed to speak.
Thank heaven we all got clear.
It was Scannon. He kept at us until we moved.
You mean that dog knew?
Some dogs have a perception like a sixth sense.
From now on, Scannon gets the choice of the meat that I shoot.
The big dog stood there looking at us, his tongue lolling and his tail wagging. I showed him my approval by scratching his ears, and so did Billy. But the others just wanted to touch him, as if he was some sort of magic talisman.
Next morning, there was no rain, no wind. Back to the tow ropes again. Meriwether, hobbling on the sorest feet in the group, stayed ashore, moving slowly toward an upriver bluff he was determined to climb for a panoramic view of the area. Along about midday, when we had to stop to switch those at the oars with those at the tow ropes, we were near the foot of the bluff. Meriwether was on top of it, tottering a bit on his bandaged feet.
Below! Down below! Those who can, come on up!
Cruzat, Windsor, and I made the climb, and we weren't disappointed. Many, many miles to the west, we saw the shining, snow-capped crests of a rugged, youthful range of mountains.
Look at that.
Those are the Western Mountains, huh?
Indians call them the Shining Mountains, or the Rockies.
Looking at them gives a man some hope. We are getting there.
I hope we don't have to pull the boats over them.
Wait, did you feel that? Is there a wind coming up?
Yes, I feel it too.
All right, come on, let's get back to the boats. Let's use that wind, get a few miles closer to those snowy monsters.
The evening of June 2nd, we reached a place where another river joined the Missouri, forming a sort of rough Y, with each fork approximately the size of the other.
Looks like a problem to me, Meriwether. We're to follow the Missouri, but which is the Missouri?
At this time of night, I don't know. Let's wait till morning.
Going to be a hard decision, night or morning. Let's bolster morale by asking Charbonneau to cook supper.
Whatever weaknesses Charbonneau had, they had nothing to do with his culinary skills. Well-filled stomachs made us sleep easily, and we awoke to a morning which showed us our dilemma of the two rivers in bright sunshine.
Meriwether, both forks look about the same width. I judge they're about equal in volume of water. Either one could be the Missouri.
We need to do a little reconnoitering.
Most of the men are footsore and exhausted. We'll have to keep reconnaissance parties at minimum strength.
5 or 6 each.
If you agree, I'll explore the South Fork with York, Sergeant Gass, George Shannon, and the two Fields boys.
It's a fairly healthy group. I'll take Sergeant Pryor, Shields, Windsor, LaPage, Cruzat, and Drouillard. Might be a good idea if Sergeant Ardway moves camp to the spit of land between rivers. The men can rest and make new moccasins.
Good. How far upstream do you want to go?
Let's figure a maximum of 4 days.
Well, that should tell us something definite.
We assembled our respective patrols, and a few minutes after Billy Clark had started along the South Fork, I led my 6 men along the banks of the North Fork. This river seemed to be flowing in almost a north-south direction, through open plains-type country.
This is Missouri, Captain.
It looks like that.
Same old Missouri mud.
And the same old prickly pear along the opposite bank.
Then you all think it's the Missouri because the water's muddy.
The bottom, too, is earthy and soft.
If it is the Missouri, how do you account for the north-south direction? The way to the Pacific is west.
Sooner or later, it will turn west, sir.
I wish I could be as certain as you are. George, you and Sergeant Pryor better move on ahead and shoot us some dinner.
Yes, sir. What is your pleasure? Buffalo, elk, deer, bear, or waterfowl?
How about prairie dogs?
What, you mean that, sir?
You better get a few just in case there's nothing bigger available.
Yes, sir.
As it turned out, Pryor and Rouillard shot elk along with the prairie dogs, but fussy appetite or not, I found I preferred the latter. By the third day, I became convinced that the North Fork could not be part of our route to the Pacific. I know you all believe this river's the Missouri, but you're wrong.
Well, then what is it, Captain? The one that the Mandans talked about, the river that scolds all others?
No, we passed that one back 100 or so miles.
Captain Louis, I will swear this is the Missouri.
We'll take one last look. From the top of the cliff up ahead, if the river doesn't turn west, we're going back to camp. Pryor, you and Shields and Rouillard stay here and build a raft. We can save time by floating back to camp.
Yes, sir.
Come on, Windsor, let's go.
Yes, sir.
We started up a slope that was cliff-like in its steepness. Gasping, we reached the halfway point of the ascent, where the ground leveled off a bit. To the left of me was a deep chasm. When I felt myself going, I drove my pontoon into the side of the cliff and hung on. Slowly, I pulled myself back to safety, only to hear Windsor cry out.
Help, Captain! Help!
Windsor had slipped too. He was lying on his stomach with his right arm and leg clawing at the air. The moment the strength in his left arm waned, he would plunge to his death. I eyed him, pretending a confidence I certainly didn't feel.
Help me, Captain. I'm going to fall.
No, you're not. Do as I say and you'll get clear. Use your right hand to reach your knife. Right hand, I said.
All right. I got it.
Now, dig a toe hold for your right foot. That's it. Put your right foot in.
Yes, sir.
Now, shove upward to the left with both feet. Hard. Good. Rest a minute. Get your breath. And we'll find an easier way to the top.
Thank you, sir. I thought it was all over.
We made it to the top. Shading our eyes with our hands, we followed the progress of the river. It continued a winding course north with no significant turn to the west. Using a different descent, we returned to the river bank where the other four were grouped about a partially built makeshift raft, eyeing it dubiously.
He's no use, Captain. There just is not enough wood here to make a seaworthy raft.
On the way back to the main camp, a disagreeable trip because rain turned the earth into a particularly viscous mud beside the river. I spoke of the two rivers to the men. Each was convinced that this muddy North Fork was the Missouri. It's carrying a load of silt from the Canadian plains.
Silt from here, too, sir. It could make its western turn beyond where we could see from that hill.
I stopped discussing the question because I knew that ultimately the decision would have to be mine and Billy Clark's. It was another command decision and a crucial one. An error in judgment, and we could be taken many hundreds of miles out of our way. And by the time we retraced our steps, it would be too late in the season to attempt the crossing of the Rocky Mountains. Cold, wet, and tired, we reached the main camp 2 days late. After a warm meal and a chance to dry out, I was ready to attack the problem of the two rivers.
Men, move in here so Captain Lewis and I can talk to you.
Yes, sir. About the rivers, Captain Clark?
That's right. I think we all know that a wrong decision could possibly cause the failure of the expedition. At the very best, it could delay our arrival on the Pacific coast a year. Charbonneau, did you discuss it with Sacagawea?
Yes, Captain. We spent much time talking. When she was stolen from her people 5 years ago by the Gros Ventre raiding party, they stayed away from the rivers where they might find other Indians. They rode swift horses overland,
clear to the Dakota country.
She remembers no talk among her people about these two rivers.
No, but it is her opinion that the muddy one is the Missouri. For what it is worth, that is also my opinion.
The 6 men who went with me also agree with that.
Well, simply because the South Fork is clean and clear with a pebbled bed. That's not the Missouri they've struggled with the past year, but it does happen to be the Missouri of the mountains before taking on a burden of plains country silt. And it does head west.
None of us wants to make a mistake, sir. None of us wants to fail any more than you. Since I got back from the reconnaissance with Captain Lewis, I've talked to everyone. 29 of us are in favor of the North Fork. 30 if you count Sacagawea.
You may be in favor of it, Windsor, but that doesn't matter. The decision has to come from Captain Lewis and me.
Some of you may know that I have a fiancée back in Virginia, Miss Mariah Wood. Very attractive young lady. I've just named the North Fork Mariah's River after her, so it can't be the Missouri.
I don't mean to say that your opinions don't count, because without you, there would be no Corps of Discovery. What I do mean is that Captain Lewis and I have to live with the results of the decision, good or bad.
That's one of the penalties of being an officer. We both want you to get as much rest as possible today. Tomorrow we move west, up the Missouri, the clear South Fork that leads to the mountains.
The men thought we were wrong, yet they were determined to follow us. This loyal group was a far cry from the half-disciplined Corps of Discovery that set out from St. Louis over a year ago. Suddenly, I felt like a giant. Because of the men, we would make it. We would stand on the Pacific shore, and we would make it back to report our discovery.
You have been listening to Horizons West, the continued story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Chapter 4, Into the Unknown, starred Harry Bartell as Meriwether Lewis and John Anderson as William Clark. Featured in the cast were Carl Swenson, Sebastian Cabot, Don Diamond, Stephen Bell, and Dal McCannon. Our story was written by Carl A. and William Tunberg and directed by William Lally. Sound patterns by Gene Twombly. Michael Rye speaking. This is the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. American West. Once it could have been the British, Spanish, or even the Russian West. It became American primarily because of the explorations of two young Army officers, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Their pioneering journey stands as one of the great achievements in the history of the United States.
you too, Goodrich. Get over here and tend to this gear. If there was any engine snooping around, it would have been stolen long ago.
Captain Clark, what if a sergeant lost his voice? Would he get demoted to private?
Cruzat Pryor's a very good man.
Well, just joking, sir.
The river's getting more and more difficult, especially for the red longboat.
Well, sir, it was built for the deep, wide Missouri.
And not this narrow, fast Missouri.
Well, that's about it, sir.
Sergeant Pryor says you know how to make a cache in the Indian style.
Yes, sir.
Two pirogues. We want to hide the red one and cache some of the heavier gear, and the greater part of the scientific specimens we've collected since Fort Mandan. We'll continue with the white one, although we may have to make one or two small dugouts to supplement our canoes.
The rise behind us, sir, that looks like it's above the high water mark.
We'll make sure of it, Cruzat. This cache must stay dry. There will be irreplaceable items stored in it.
Yes, sir.
And we'd rather not have the Indians discovered after we leave and they come poking around our campsite.
Oh, I can disguise it. I need 3 men to work with me in relays. That is, if you want the job done fast.
Pick them and start after the noon meal.
Yes, sir.
Captain Clark. Captain Lewis, I need help.
What's the trouble, Charbonneau?
Sacagawea. I've never seen her so sick. She says she's going to die.
Horizons West, the continued story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Now, with Harry Bartell as Meriwether Lewis and John Anderson as William Clark, listen to Chapter 5, The Great Falls. The Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery was only a day's travel beyond the junction of Marias River and the Missouri in the north-central part of what is now the state of Montana. The men had declared that Marias River was the correct route west. The two captains had stood for the Missouri, the route which the expedition now followed. Despite the difference of opinion, the men were loyally following their leaders. Now, however, more problems faced them. Travel upstream had become increasingly hard, and there was the constant urgency of having to reach the mountains before winter closed in and made further travel impossible.
Sacagawea, I am back.
Captain Clark, Captain Lewis, you have brought them.
Yes. They will make you well again.
The baby?
I will quiet you.
I do not know what will happen to the baby if I die.
There. Be a good boy, huh? No more crying.
How long have you been sick, Sacagawea?
3 days. I hoped the pain would go away and I would not become a burden.
Where do you feel this pain?
The middle of my body. Sometimes like the sharp knife. Sometimes like the heavy club.
You don't mind if I examine you, Sacagawea?
You are a medicine man. Do what your art tells you.
Meriwether, help me turn her on her back.
Of course.
Easy. There.
She seems very warm to the touch.
It's a high fever. Sacagawea, have you tried to eat anything today?
Nothing.
See. Now, I'm going to put some pressure on your stomach. Can you tell me where it hurts? Here? Hurt a little?
Yes.
There?
Oh.
Meriwether, did you bring along that box of Dr. Rush's pills?
Yes, I did.
Charbonneau, come here a minute.
What can I do, Captain?
Give her these 2 pills with a little water. Then make some cold compresses to reduce this fever. We'll look in again in the morning.
Will I die?
Not if we can help it. You stay flat on your back. Let your husband take care of you and the baby. Come on, Meriwether. Well, Meriwether, what do you think?
I don't like to say it, but it seems to me like the sickness that killed Sergeant Floyd.
Floyd's abdomen is much more sensitive to the touch.
And so hers will be tomorrow.
Well, all we can do is wait and see. Of course, the men can use time in camp to make new clothes. with her equipment.
A day or two in camp, no matter what they're doing, they'll turn it into a morale problem.
Time is passing, and we're no nearer the mountains and the Shoshones and the horses they can trade us.
Most of our men don't think that far ahead. They just think that we're leading them in the wrong direction. Most of them still believe Mariah's river is the Missouri.
The Great Falls will prove we're right. The Mandan said it was a feature of the upper Missouri, and so did Sacagawea.
I think I have a solution, Billy. You stay here and doctor Sacagawea, and I'll take a few men and reconnoiter upriver.
Good idea. After you've actually seen the falls, every man will know we're on the right path. If I were you, I think I'd start at dawn.
Take Drea, Goodrich, Gibson, and Joe Field.
Fine. Now, let's have a look at that cache.
We moved toward the rise where Cruzat and Goodrich were working. We stopped short of them as we heard their voices.
Only 4 feet to go to each after all this time.
You sound more like a sergeant every day.
Oh, time in grade, Silas, my boy.
Plus experience and brains, I suppose.
Naturally. Gee.
Yes, sir, Senior Private. If fiddles were rifles, you'd be a general.
Captain Clark. Cruzat. Goodrich. A little less talk and more digging.
Yes, Sergeant.
Come on, Billy, let's have a closer look.
Well, looks pretty good, Cruzat.
The chunk of sod we first got is 2.5 feet in diameter. We're widening the opening little by little as we go down. It'll end up 7 feet deep and 7 feet across the bottom, sir.
While we watched, Shields and Bratton came in, and Pryor had them tote dirt away and dump it into the river. By evening, the cache was finished, ready to receive the articles we would store there the next morning.
I was worried about Meriwether the next morning. He ate no breakfast, complained of stomach pains as he shouldered his pack and hurried Gibson, Drudyard, Joe Fields, and Goodrich along the bank of the river. I watched them until they were lost to sight in a clump of cottonwoods. Then I supervised the loading of our heavy goods into the cache. Blacksmith tools, spare rations, gunpowder and lead canisters, and, of course, specimens. These were placed on a floor of dry twigs. Animal skins were spread on top, and then Cruzat filled in with dirt. Finally, replaced a 2.5-foot circle of sod.
Looks pretty natural, doesn't it,
In
sir?
a few days, nobody'll be able to see where your spade touched ground.
And now I look for a place to hide the red boat.
Maybe that islet in the middle of the river.
Well, that's what I was thinking, sir.
Captain Clark, Sacagawea is no better this morning. And I worn myself out running to and from the river to make coal complex.
You're complaining, Charbonneau. You ought to be glad to do something to help her.
But I'm not helping, Captain. It is futile. She will die.
Well, we'll try something else. Maybe I ought to bleed her.
Bleed her? You mean take away blood of a woman who's already too weak?
Only a small amount. Most doctors consider it an effective treatment.
If you say so, Captain, but please, do not kill her. We stopped before dark to make camp and eat, but I had lost my appetite and couldn't touch a thing. My stomach was a battleground of aches and pains.
Captain Lewis, you sure you won't have a steak?
Oh, no. It's all I can stand to watch you eat.
I'm sorry.
I hate to admit it, but I'm not well. My stomach is full of pain and I'm running a fever.
What I can do, Captain?
I noticed chokecherry bushes down by the river. I seem to remember my mother brewing a remedy she called chokecherry tea.
Chokecherry tea? That is poison.
Sure is, sir. Just the same, I want you to go out and get some of the berries and the twigs.
Oh, but, sir...
Do as I say.
Yes, sir.
Drouillard brought back the twigs and the berries. Under my direction, he cooked them into a black and evil-looking fluid. Over the protests of the men, I drank 2 cups of the foul stuff. Then I sat by the fire and waited. I began to sweat, and at first my stomach felt worse. 2 hours passed. Everybody was asleep but George Drouillard and me. George? George.
Yes, Captain.
The pain is gone. And the fever.
Oh. Well, I guess if that stuff does not kill a man, it kills what is ailing him.
You think you could fry me an elk steak?
I sure could, sir.
When morning came, I was completely myself. We broke camp and moved ahead over rough country abounding in rocks and gullies, in prickly pear and rattlesnakes. By the evening of the second day, we were glad to camp, eat, and fall into the sleep of exhausted men. Morning found us renewed. We pushed on over the rough country. You hear that, sir? Sounds like a waterfall. We moved forward. The sound became a roar, and the river was partially obscured by the white spray of the water as it spilled down the face of the bluff. It was a spectacular sight, even from the imperfect position we occupied.
Will you look at that?
That is the greatest sight in the world.
If we climb up on these rocks, we'll get a better view.
Yes, sir.
We climbed a ridge of rock which roughly paralleled the river some distance from the falls and at a higher elevation. From here, we could see water pouring over nearly perpendicular cliffs, dropping 80 to 100 feet to strike across 300 yards of river with a boiling, vaporous impact. While the men made camp and cooked a sumptuous meal of buffalo hump, trout, and parched corn, I wrote a detailed description of the falls, which did seem to have the advantage of a first impression. Indeed, Billy Clark and I were right about our choice of rivers, but making portage around the Great Falls was going to be a fearsome task. I decided to send Joe Fields back to the main camp with word of our discovery.
Today, Joe Fields transformed our camp with the news he brought. Captain Lewis had led him and the others to the fabled Great Falls. I watched all the small doubts and skepticisms leave the men, to be replaced by a new spirit of unity and a desire to go forward. Obviously, it was time to break camp, even if it meant moving Sacagawea. With the help of Charbonneau, we made a bed for her in the white pirogue, launched our boats to do battle with the swiftly moving river.
All right, put some muscle into it. Oh! Look out ahead. Prickly pear. Prickly pear. The water's only waist deep. Take to the water. Pull! Pull!
It took 3 days for us to reach Portage Creek, just below the falls, where Meriwether had set up a camp, which would be our base during the portage. I gave orders for Shields and Bratton to help Charbonneau construct a tent shelter for the ailing Sacagawea. Then climbed up on a high point with Meriwether Lewis for a view of the falls.
Beautiful sight, isn't it? Yes. Is that all you have to say?
Well, I'm thinking of the portage. We have a lot of equipment to move. There's several more falls beyond this first one, I suppose.
5 in all, in a 10-mile stretch of river. As near as I can calculate, the portage will be about 18 miles.
Over rough ground?
The ground could be worse. What worries me is an overabundance of prickly pear and rattlesnakes and unpredictable weather. Now, just the last few days, it's changed from heat to cold to rain to wind. We've had hailstorm and a flash flood.
Maybe we'd better find a place to hide the white pirogue. That 50-foot boat is our biggest.
At the far end, we can make a couple of dugouts to replace it. The men can carry the light baggage. For the canoes and the heavy gear, we'll build trucks.
Trucks? Out of what? All I see is a stand of cottonwood.
Well, it may not be the strongest of wood, but we have no choice. There's one big tree near the creek that's about 2 feet in diameter. We can cut across sections of it for wheels.
It might work.
Got to work. Unless you want to spend the winter here.
No, thanks.
How is Sacagawea?
Worse. I think we're going to lose her. We did Floyd.
Sure it's the same complaint?
I don't really know. I wish I were more of a doctor.
How have you been treating her?
Cataplasms of bark and laudanum. Doesn't help.
You know, we might try something that cured me of a violent abdominal disorder on the way to the falls.
Huh? What's that?
Chokecherry tea.
Don't know anything about it.
We can't let her die.
Not without trying it, I guess.
In a hollow at the bottom of the bluff, we'll find some chokecherry bushes. We'll pick enough twigs and fruit to brew several quarts.
You know, Meriwether, I hate to think of what would happen to the baby if she should die.
You're fond of her and that baby, aren't you?
Charbonneau treats her badly. If she dies, it'll be his fault. I had doubts about the chokecherry tea, although I said nothing to Meriwether. After all, it was a last resort. We took the concoction to the tent, where the suffering Sacagawea lay. Charbonneau admitted us.
How is she, Charbonneau?
Part of the time out of her head.
In the fever.
Right now, she sleeps. Gentlemen, I'm worried. Worried. What do I do if she dies? How will I care for the child? Where will I find milk?
There's no need to indulge yourself in that kind of thinking. Sacagawea is still alive. Captain Lewis brought a new medicine.
A new medicine. What good can it possibly do after the bark and the laudanum has failed? No, Captain, it is most difficult when a man faces the loss of a beloved wife.
It's difficult for us, too. As doctors, we hate to lose a patient. As leaders, we hate to lose a follower. And as human beings, we hate to lose a valued friend. Now, do you think you can make her drink this medicine?
I can try.
You'll have to do better than that. Waker, tell her it has a vile and bitter taste, but it also has great curative powers. If you have to, force it down. A pint now, another pint tonight, a third in the morning. Captain Clark and I will be back again tomorrow. If there's an emergency, you know where to find us.
That night, while the men ate a good and ample meal, we assigned groups to the necessary preliminary tasks of the portage. Sergeant Ordway and a detail would build the trucks. Sergeant Gass and his squad would carefully mark the portage route with stakes. And Sergeant Pryor and his men were charged with the hiding of the white pirogue and the making of another cache. In the morning after breakfast, and after the men had begun their tasks, Meriwether and I went to find out the condition of our patient, Sacagawea.
There's no sign of life at the tent.
Also no sign of death.
We'll soon find out. Charbonneau.
Come in.
Captain Clark. Captain Lewis, good morning.
Sacagawea, you're better.
Why, it's like a miracle.
I'm weak, but the pain is gone. Soon I will be on my feet.
This trip is too much for her. This trip filled with hell.
No, Puissant. Sickness comes any place, any time.
No. Gentlemen, I am compelled to take her away. Back to where living is easier.
You don't mean that.
I do, Captain Louis. Issue me a warrant for my pay.
Nobody quits in the middle of this kind of job. You know that.
I seem to remember you begging for this job back at Fort Mandan.
And my money, please. Sacagawea must go to a better climate.
Puissant, I'm ashamed of you.
Be quiet, squaw.
No, Puissant. The squaw will speak. She will go on with the captain. She will help them to know her people and get them horses to ride over the shining mountains. She will hope that you do not desert, that you do your promised work.
This is not an expedition assembled for private gain, Charbonneau. None of us enlisted in the hope of getting rich. You're a member of the Corps of Discovery.
And I have had more than enough of it, Captain. Only fools go through this kind of ordeal for $25 per month and a very poor kind of keep.
Because of Sacagawea, I won't put you under arrest and have you tried before a court-martial. This once, I'll remind you that when you enlisted, you also pledged yourself to the government of the United States. Either you live up to your pledge and return with honor with the rest of us, or you will go back a prisoner in disgrace. The portage began. Boats were loaded on the cottonwood trucks. Ropes were attached, and the men pulled the trucks over the rocky, bumpy portage road we had staked across the uneven plain.
Come on, pull! Get your backs into it. Pull!
You think we're
If you was, we'd have no worrying about how to cross the mountains. Now, come on, pull!
The men kept on pulling with all their might, plodding through fields of prickly pears. The thorns pierced the soles of their moccasins and cut into their feet. Sergeant Pryor watched the group towing his truck very, very carefully, calling for a rest period just before the weakest of the men was about to collapse.
All right, halt! Lock those wheels and rest.
Say, Pryor.
What do you want now, Cruzat?
Feel that wind?
Yeah, maybe it'll make us a little cooler dragging up the next rise.
It's strong enough to do more than that.
What do you mean?
Why not put up the sail?
Are you crazy, Cruzat?
We have wheels last time I looked.
Good idea. Captain Lewis?
I heard the suggestion. Go ahead, try it.
Hooray! Get that sail up fast before the wind quits.
They raised the sail. Cruzat manipulated it so that it caught the full force of the wind. The truck began to roll. It picked up speed. The men leaped on for a dry land sailing trip.
Hey! We're blowing up a storm! Look at there! Rain clouds in the west! Let it come! Look at the wind keeps steady! Hey, look out!
Stop the truck! Halt! That cottonwood's just too blame weak for axles.
Better use the mast for a new axle. It'll be strong enough.
All right, men. On the double.
While the unremitting labor of the portage went on, I established another camp at the far end of the falls. On the way back from moving personal baggage from old camp to new, the wind began to blow. The sky darkened. The sun was entirely swallowed up in a night-like blackness. With me were Sacagawea and her baby, and Charbonneau. My man York had gone on up ahead to do a little hunting.
Come quickly, under those trees.
No, that's not high enough ground in case of flood. Now, over this way.
We took cover under a ledge of rock near the top of the ravine. We crouched there for at least half an hour while the rain pounded down.
Oh, do not cry, Betsy. It is only rain. Rain that makes all things grow.
This kind of rain beats things to death.
Well, it never lasts very long.
We can hope not, Captain. We can hope not.
What's that?
I looked and saw a torrent rushing down the ravine and rising toward us. Quick! Everybody out of here!
Mon Dieu, it's a flood!
We clawed our way up the side of the ravine, with Charbonneau in the lead, of course. Just as the rising waters, carrying all kinds of debris, touched my feet, Charbonneau panicked and couldn't seem to move.
Save me! Save me! I cannot
Don't move, Charbonneau! Move!
Quick now, quick!
Get up there fast or I'll drown you!
The threat worked. He scrambled up the rest of the way, even offering a helping hand to Sacagawea and the baby. I pushed from below. The water rose to my waist. Finally, we all clambered to safety. When I turned to look back where we had been, the ledge had vanished, covered by at least 5 feet of rushing water. The days seemed to creep past. We observed the 4th of July with a fusillade of rifle fire and the issuing of the last of the whiskey, and then continued our work. Finally, on July 15th, a full month after our arrival at the Great Falls, we were ready to move on. We loaded the boats and were about to push out into the river once again when I noticed Sacagawea making marks with a stick in the damp earth near the riverbank. I asked her what she was doing.
We near the country of my people. I write in the earth. I say you are friends of the Shoshone.
Ensuing travel became more and more difficult. Oars would not prevail against the stronger currents we encountered. We had to use the poles and the tow ropes in combination with oars. The slowest, most agonizing method of transportation known to man. From dawn to dusk each day, the courage and staying powers of the men were tested and retested. Now and then, along the shore, we would see Indian lodges and teepees, some long abandoned, others hastily vacated, as if their tenants took to the hills at the first sight of us. Then, on the 27th of July, we arrived at another river junction, the Three Forks, where the mountains leveled into a long, high plain. We camped on a height where we could see ahead for many miles.
Captain Clark, there. We were down there near the river. The enemy came on swift horses.
5 years ago?
Yes. We fled up the river. Our warriors made a stand, but they were too few, and the Gros Ventre were too strong. Many of my people were wounded. 8 or 10 were killed. I tried to run. An enemy warrior rode me down. He made me his prisoner.
Your family was with you when it happened?
We were separated in the first rush. I do not know if they lived or they died.
I'm sorry. Maybe some of them lived through it. Maybe you will find them again.
I hope so.
But when? Why do they hide from us? Why do they stay in the hills?
Maybe they fear my writing in the earth is only a trick.
In the meantime, all we can do is keep on, up the largest river of the three, until we run out of water. We had to have horses. We had to get across the high mountains. But the timid Shoshones remained in hiding. And we kept on poling and pulling our way up the river.
You have been listening to Horizons West, the continued story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Chapter 5, The Great Falls, starred Harry Bartell as Meriwether Lewis and John Anderson as William Clark. Featured in the cast were Sebastian Cabot, Carl Swenson, Helen Gerald, Don Diamond, Frank Gerstle, and Herb Ellis. Our story was written by Carly and William Tunberg and directed by William Lally. Michael Rye speaking. This is the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. American West. Once it could have been the British, Spanish, or even the Russian West. It became American primarily because of the explorations of two young Army officers, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Their pioneering journey stands as one of the great achievements in the history of the United States.
Governor!
Oui?
Serve each man a small flour cake with his meat.
Yes, Captain Clark.
Cake? What is this, Billy? A special occasion? Did you find the headwaters of the Columbia just over the hill?
Not exactly, Meriwether. It happens to be August 1st, 1805. 35 years ago, I was born.
I'd forgotten. Congratulations. Many happy returns of the day.
18 days, it'll be your birthday.
I hope we'll have horses by then, because in 18 days we'll run out of river.
Sacagawea, why do your people keep on hiding from us?
The rifle makes the death noise. No matter who fires it, friend or enemy, it sends my people into flight.
We can't do without the hunting parties, not unless we want to starve.
As soon as my ankle is better, I'm going looking for Shoshones.
How about me doing that today?
I thought you had a sick stomach.
It's as easy to be sick hunting Shoshones as it is poling a boat upriver.
Maybe easier. Why not take Sergeant Gass with you? He hurt his back, can't use a pole, but he can walk.
All right. Gass and George Drouillard. He's better at sign language than any of us in case we meet the Shoshone.
May I go, Captain Lewis?
You, Charbonneau?
My uncle will not stand the tow rope or the pushing pole, but I can walk.
Horizons West, the continued story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Now with Harry Bartell as Meriwether Lewis and John Anderson as William Clark, listen to Chapter 6, Shoshone Country. Although the summer sun burned down upon the toiling men of the Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery on August 1st, 1805, winter weather was only a month away in the high country they traveled. Today, that country is part of the state of Idaho. Officers and men knew they had to have Shoshone horses and guides once they left the natural track of the river. Finding these Indians was now a matter of life and death, and it drove 4 men into the rugged wilderness. Meriwether Lewis with an ailing stomach, Sergeant Patrick Gass with a sprained back, Toussaint Charbonneau with a bad leg, and Georges Drouillard, reasonably sound and healthy.
45 miles in the last 2 days, by my calculations.
Oh, mon Dieu, that is too far for a cripple. Oh, no wonder my leg hurts.
All hurt if we don't find Indians soon.
Captain Lewis.
Yes, Sergeant.
My back, sir. I'm sorry. I can't go no further.
You look tired yourself, Captain. Why we don't rest here?
Have to keep on. Stop, we'll never start again.
Oh, my leg. The uncle went out from under me.
Don't move. Rest it.
I'd better rest, too. My back is killing me.
Gass, can you and Charbonneau find your way to the river?
After we rest, yes, sir.
Boat shouldn't be far behind. They'll pick you up. George, let's keep moving.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes you can sense that the Indians are near, hiding behind the trees, watching from behind bushes and rocks.
Why they do not stop running long enough to find out what our intentions are.
Sacagawea keeps saying they're afraid. They don't care about our intentions. They just want to stay away from us.
No, that is too bad.
George. Now. Oh, my back.
Stay still. Let me see if you have any broken bones. The shoulder's all right. Ribs are sound.
I spent half my life in the wilderness. You'd think I would have
enough sense by now to watch where I put my feet, would you not?
Just take it easy. You'll feel better in a few minutes.
Yes, sir.
Instead of easing, the pain grew worse. There was only one thing to do: rejoin the main party. It took 2 hours of fighting our way through thorns, briars, and prickly pear before we reached the river and found Billy Clark and the men in camp. With them were Charbonneau and Gas.
Didn't expect to see you two so soon.
George had a bad fall. He wrenched his back.
I'll sit by the fire, George. Little heat ought to ease the pain.
Thank you, Captain.
You all right, Meriwether?
A little tired.
Any Indians?
Not a sign.
I was hoping you'd have better luck. We've had a miserable time of it. Current's very fast. Only way we've been able to move is with double-manned tow ropes, oars, and poles.
We must have passed the head of navigation some miles ago.
If we had horses, I'd just as soon never look at this river again.
Horses.
We did see a Shoshone footprint yesterday.
Where?
20 miles downriver. Sergeant Ordway followed tracks to a campsite only a mile away, but no Indians. Meriwether, I think it's plain we're not going to meet any Shoshones. Not unless we corner them.
A few more days passed during which we confined ourselves to the battle with the narrowing river. Reconnoitering ahead of the main party, George Drouillard, his back much improved, and I, came to a fork in the river. After we determined that the left fork was the correct route, we left a marker for Billy Clark on a stick driven into the bank. And then the two of us moved on toward the other fork, following a recent Indian trail.
Captain Clark.
What is it, Sergeant Gas?
What river do I take, sir?
Any markers?
No markers, sir.
Then keep right.
Yes, sir.
Soon I could see that the fork we followed was dwindling into some sort of backcountry creek. We managed several miles by dint of towing, poling, and rowing. Then up ahead, Meriwether Lewis and George Drouillard appeared from the brush and began waving at us.
Look sharp. Captain Lewis and Drouillard ahead. Put in the shore, Sergeant Gas.
We'll camp here for the night.
Yes, sir. Who's that? Right rudder.
Meriwether waved and yelled, but I couldn't make out what he wanted. When he realized we were heading for shore, he lapsed into silence and calmly waited for us. As soon as my boat touched the bank, I leaped out.
Bill, you came up the wrong river.
Wrong river? I saw no markers. That meant hold my course.
But there was a marker. George left one.
Yes, sir. On a willow stick jammed in the bank where you couldn't miss it, sir.
Oh, I saw nothing. Neither did Sergeant Gas.
Captain Louis, may I go back and find out what happened?
Go ahead. No real harm done, I guess. We can turn back in the morning and take the correct fork.
Captain Clark, Captain Louis, look. The shining mountains.
They're beautiful.
This saddle-shaped path. Do you see it?
Oh, yes. It's to the right of you, Billy.
My people use it to journey to the western slope. It is called the Lemhi.
You mean the slopes that go on down to the Pacific?
That is what the wise men say. To the salt sea.
Well, then it's the Continental Divide. If it was a month earlier, we might be able to go through on foot without horses.
Soon the snows will fall deep in the Lemhi.
About the time the cooks were preparing our supper, George Drouillard returned.
Captain Louis.
What did you find out, George?
Well, never fasten a marker to a green, freshly cut willow stick. That is a beaver food.
You mean to say that a beaver ate the marker?
Yes, sir. The paper was lying in the mud. All around there was beaver tracks, and there was teeth marks in what was left of the stick.
The trip back to the Forks produced a double accident. One of the boats capsized in the tricky, swirling current, dumping its cargo into the water. Trying to right the boat, Private Joe Whitehouse slipped on the rocks and incurred painful injuries. We spent an entire day recovering and drying out the spilled cargo, and I treated the contusions and sprains of Private Whitehouse. Finally, we turned upriver in the right direction, and it was back to the ropes and poles. For 2 days, high winds blew water at us, keeping us thoroughly drenched. On the night of August 8th, when we made camp, I could literally feel the discouragement of the men.
Sergeant Gass!
Yes, Captain Clark?
How are the men?
They're worn out, sir.
Are they still with us?
Well, sir, I guess they feel the way I do, most of them, anyhow. You got us this far. You'll get us the rest of the way.
I hope so.
In the morning, I'm going out to find Indians. I'll take Drouillard, Shields, and McNeil. Tell them to get ready.
Yes, sir.
Tell them we'll stay out indefinitely. We're not coming back until we find Shoshones.
Look out! Ned!
Watch it, McNeil! Thank you, George. That could have been trouble. It looks to me like about 10 miles of grassland ahead before we reach the hills. We'll spread out. If you men pick up a trail, I want my attention. Put your hat on the muzzle of your rifle and hold it high.
Yes, sir.
The grass was almost as high as our heads, a paradise for cattle. We moved ahead for about 15 minutes, and then I spotted a horseman directly ahead of me, perhaps 2 miles distant. I examined him through my telescope. He answered Sacagawea's description of a Shoshone warrior, and he rode an elegant horse. He didn't see us at first, for at most only our heads showed above the sea of grass. I concentrated on moving closer and closer to him, and a look to either side showed me that Drouillard, Shields, and McNeil were doing the same. And then the warrior saw us. One by one, by the way, his head jerked apprehensively from right to left. I signaled the men. Drouillard responded by halting, but the other two plowed on. The Indian sat his horse like an equestrian statue. I moved on. And then 50 yards from him, I cried out the only two Shoshone words I knew, the words for white man. Tababone! 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 Drouillard had caught the thought and was helpfully echoing me. I put down my rifle, lifted my blanket, and spread it on the ground 3 times in the traditional Plains Indian gesture of friendship. It had little or no effect because Shields and McNeil emerged from the tall grass and moved stolidly and steadily toward the Indians. Shields! McNeil! Halt! Halt! They kept on as if they had heard nothing. Suddenly the warrior wheeled his horse and galloped away. I was filled with anger. I ran ahead, Drouillard angling along with me, to where the other 2 men finally stopped.
Sorry. He ran away.
What did you expect? Why did you ignore the order to halt?
Well, I don't know, except I thought I could grab the bridle of his horse.
Shields, when I want you to use your own initiative, I'll tell you. That Indian might still be here if you and McNeil had obeyed orders. Now get over there and bring me my rifle.
Yes, sir.
Wait. No use my taking out my disappointment on you. After you get my rifle, we're going to that hill over there. We're going to build a big fire and eat breakfast where people for miles around can locate us. No invading war party would ever do that.
Captain, do you want me to go out and shoot something for the part?
No shooting. That will alarm all Shoshones within earshot.
Ah, yes, you are right.
I brought some pemmican. We'll heat it.
Yes, sir. I'll start the fire.
After we ate, we went back to where we had encountered the Shoshone warrior. His trail was easy to follow. We stayed on it for about a mile, and then big drops of rain splattered against my cheek.
Hey, you're really coming down.
Take shelter under that tree.
And McNeil, over here.
We huddled in the circle of comparative dry provided by the tree. After about an hour, the rain slackened and stopped. We went back to the trail, only to find it had been completely obliterated by the rain.
It looked like the weather is on their side.
All right, one warrior got away. It only means that we start over. I want you to spread out, within hailing distance. Look for more signs. After several hours, I picked up what seemed to be a frequently used trail. I called in the men, and we moved ahead in a group. The trail became a footpath as it led in a series of turns downhill. And suddenly we came upon 3 Shoshone squaws. The youngest ran, but the other 2 apparently resigned themselves to death. They sat down, lowering their heads submissively.
Tababone. Tababone.
The 2 women betrayed no emotion as George repeated the Shoshone words. I took the older woman's hand and put a string of beads into it. She raised her eyes and smiled in a sort of vast relief. We bestowed more baubles upon them, giving each, in addition, a pewter mirror and a pot of $1,000,000. George, talk to them in sign language. Tell them we want to go to their village.
All right, I try, sir.
As Druyar made his signs, the youngest woman returned. We gave her gifts while Druyar seemed to make the 2 older ones understand that we came as friends and wished to parley with the chief. At last, the eldest woman rose, motioned for us to follow, and started down the footpath. Soon the path lost itself in a clearing, and ahead was a large Shoshone village. The entire village displayed excitement at our arrival. Aping the gestures of Druyar, we made the sign of peace over and over. Presently, we were before a medium-sized man who had the look of authority about him. George Druyar spoke to him in signs, and the chief gravely replied. The entire exchange had a kind of rhythmic style about it, and more to the point, it brought results. The chief, named Kamiaway, and his aides greeted us by pressing their greasy painted faces against ours. Soon we were streaked with their paint, but the important thing was that we had established a friendly relationship with them. I felt a considerable relief as we were led to a lodge to rest.
I've had enough of this hugging and mugging, unless they want to introduce me to some of the younger women.
You just think that you've had enough, Shields. If you want to stay out of trouble, leave the women alone.
Yes, sir.
George, I was relieved when the chief understood.
Almost always you can put across the main ideas with signs. Where you miss sometimes is with the little things.
And shadings. Well, we'll depend on Sacagawea for that.
The chief say there will be a pipe smoking in about an hour. I ought to know what to ask for after you give him the gifts.
Tell him there's another big chief with us at the river with the boats. We'll need horses to move the baggage from there to here. When we're all assembled, we'll have a big powwow and establish trade relations between our 2 nations.
I guess there's a meal connected with this, Captain. I saw some squaws at the cooking pot.
I hope so. I'm hungry.
Me too.
The meal was some sort of local root vegetable boiled. A single scant helping per person. We ate it and looked about.
That was a meal?
The Shoshone seem to think so.
Game is hard to find at this altitude this time of year.
I've seen only a pair of old muskets among the braves. They must depend on bows and arrows.
The ritual began. Part of the ceremony was the pulling off of moccasins, a meaningful act in this country of the prickly pear. A shoeless man was completely at the mercy of a man with something on his feet. Then we passed the pipe, each taking a couple of puffs. With McNeil and Shields as assistants, I handed out gifts, including medallions and flags for the chief and his aides. They were pleased and seemed well disposed to watch George as he went through a series of signs and gestures. Then he sat down, and we watched the chief.
I was very eloquent. The chief is agreeable to it all.
Then a younger man jumped up frowning and went into an angry, jerky series of gestures.
Trouble, Captain.
So I gather.
He is saying it is all a trick to enslave the chief. There is an ambush at the river.
Straighten him out, George.
Yes, I try.
George's signs were so vivid and expressive that the rest of us caught the full meaning. The suspicious warrior was mistaken. There was no ambush. Would Chief Kamiaway and his aides be courageous enough to come and find out? or were they fit only to stay home with the old women? Glowering indignantly, Camille Waite made reply. His personal courage was beyond question. He would go with us, and the best Shoshone horses would also go to carry our party and our baggage. Nothing would stop him from meeting with the other big chief of the Palefaces.
There is food for the Shoshones. A real treat. 120 pounds of venison if it is an ounce.
I should have reserved some of it for us instead of promising it all to Camille Waite.
I'll remember with the next one, sir.
If there is a next one. We watched the Shoshones. It was plain from the way they fell upon the deer that their diet had been skimpy from necessity, not choice. They tore at the flesh, broke the bones, ate the meat raw on the spot.
Turns my stomach to watch him.
It's not exactly Tidewater Society manners.
Hunger is seldom a pretty sight.
We set out for the river, filled stomachs, putting the Indians in a much more amiable mood. When we arrived, 2 hours ahead of the main party, the Indians soon became restive. I tried my hand at calming them, and so did George Drouillard. And then, to my great relief, I heard the boats. Soon our men appeared with Billy, Charbonneau, and Sacagawea leading the way.
Meriwether, you did it. You found them.
Shoshone, my people.
Mon Dieu, such fine horses.
Camille Waite. Camille Waite.
Sobbing with joy, Sacagawea rushed forward and threw herself at the Shoshone chief. Momentarily, he was surprised, even indignant, until he recognized her. Then he held her tight and made joyous sounds and stroked her hair.
Hey, Charbonneau, they're glad to see each other, aren't they? Maybe that's her first husband, huh?
No, I am her only husband.
Looks to me like she's ready to make a trade, Charbonneau.
If you did not wear stripes, I would tear off your arms and hold you down the hill like a rubber ball.
That's enough, guys. That's enough. Let him alone.
Yes, sir.
Captain Clark, Captain Louis, thank you. I am happy. This is my brother, my beloved brother. At the village lives also my sister.
Oh, that can't be. That only happens in storybooks.
You see, little fat sergeant, I am the only husband.
At first, it seemed like a family gathering. Sacagawea, the sister of the chief. White robes were spread for me and Meriwether to sit on during the trading and the bargaining. Opposite us sat Camille Waite and several sub-chiefs. Sacagawea was beside me, ready to interpret.
Sacagawea, tell them our nation is a mighty one. Tell them that we will provide them with all the necessities on a constant basis if they trade us horses and guides for our trek through the Lemhi Pass and on toward the Western Sea.
I will do so.
Sacagawea converted Meriwether's words to Shoshone. And as she spoke, Camille Waite frowned and shook his head.
He says, no guides and no horses. Horses are the only wealth of the Shoshone people.
But he has many horses. Pastured near the villages, a herd of at least 400. Doesn't he want to trade some of them for weapons to fight off raiders from the Plains people?
She turned back to speak at length. And this time Camille Waite was very thoughtful. His answer was a long time in coming, but it was a fair one.
My brother says, if you can provide many rifles and many bullets for him, he will give you horses and guides. He wants the rifles now.
Tell Camille Waite that establishing trade between his nation and the United States of America is not easy. First, we must go to the Pacific Sea, and then go back to speak for Camille Waite to Mr. Jefferson, our president. Then many authorized traders will come with rifles and many other valuables.
Sacagawea spoke once again to her brother. After a fairly long exchange, Camille Waite agreed. We could have horses and guides.
Billy Clark and a detail of men took the next few days to reconnoiter the country ahead and found it very rugged. I spent the time dickering with Camille Waite, with the invaluable help of Sacagawea. and getting the men ready for the difficult overland travel ahead. We'll have to make another cast, George.
Yes, sir. That much less to carry over the pass. Do you want me to tell Sergeant Pryor and Crozat?
I'll do that after these curious Indians stop hanging around camp and go back to the village.
How many horses we will have, Captain?
19. But we need at least 25, and even that means some of us will always be on foot.
Well, what we will do to get the extra horses, I mean. Camille's got plenty of horses.
I know. All I can do is play on his desire for rifles. I'll try him again at the last minute.
Maybe, Sacagawea...
Hello. Have you got my rifle?
Halt! Halt! Running fast, George caught up with the Indian. Terrified, the thief knocked the primer out of the rifle so he wouldn't get shot, dropped the weapon, and raced away. George picked it up and returned to me, grumbling.
There's one thing I can say, Captain. They sure are bad off for rifles.
I hate to do it, but maybe I can use this incident when I talk again with the chief.
Captain Lewis, Sacagawea brings good news.
Some good news, Captain, and some bad. First, I talked long to my brother. He will give 29 horses.
That's fine, Sacagawea.
See? I said it was good news, huh?
Now the bad part. In the pass, we will meet Flathead Indians.
They're warlike?
No, they come to join my people. All will go to the buffalo country to hunt.
You're afraid our guides will desert and go on the hunt?
My brother expects the guides to desert. They are good hunters.
Well, come on, we'll go get a clear understanding right now. George, you and Charbonneau scour these woods and see if you can get a couple of deer as a gift for the village.
Yes, Captain.
Come on, Charbonneau.
My irritation must have showed when we reached Camille's lodge in the village. Hastily, he summoned his sub-chiefs and we began to talk. Through Sacagawea, I pointed out how his niggardly attitude regarding the horses and his knowledge that the guides would desert us would certainly not increase his chances of getting firearms from my country. I insisted that he issue definite orders to the guides in the presence of Sacagawea. They were to stay with us as long as we needed them. This was done, and we returned to camp to find that Billy Clark had returned.
I hear you've had your troubles.
It's been hard trading, but the crisis is past. We have 29 horses, and the guides are pledged not to desert.
But still, you must watch them over the Lemhi.
Oh, we will.
If you will excuse me, I go to prepare for the trail.
The trail?
I assumed you would stay with your brother, your people.
First, I thought so also. Now, you are more my people. I go with you.
The next day we started for the pass, traveling over harsh and inhospitable country, but we traveled with the heaviest burdens on the backs of horses, and guided by a Shoshone father and his 4 sons. It grew colder and more desolate, and I felt very sober as I sat before the campfire that night in the Lemhi Pass. It began to snow. Snow on the 18th day of August. Snow on my 31st birthday.
You have been listening to Horizons West, the continued story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Chapter 6, Shoshone Country, starred Harry Bartell as Meriwether Lewis and John Anderson as William Clark. Featured in the cast were Carl Swenson, Sebastian Cabot, Helen Gerald, Bill Quinn, and Jim Bowles. Our story was written by Carl A. and William Tunberg and directed by William Lally. Sound patterns by Gene Twombly. Michael Rye speaking. This is the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service.
That was the first of the 6 episodes of Horizons West. We will listen to the second half of the Lewis and Clark expedition where they go through their adventures of reaching the Pacific Ocean and then heading back. Well, that's it for Airchecks for this week. Airchecks is a 3-hour podcast uploaded every Saturday and broadcasted on the K-Tai radio network every Sunday. See you at the same time and same channel.